I just think that this is a surprisingly weak performance for them at the major, which has upended many expectations of what was building to be an extremely competitive playoffs. Still is, just that missing Navi really hurts it.
Right, we're back for Snake and Banter. Our guest is a return guest. We've had him on the show before. It's Skriv, who's obviously a commentator. But as everyone knows, we like to dive straight in with the spiciest take now, because that's what all you Zoomers are all about. You're all watching shorts and TikTok and whoever knows what else is going on. And the hottest take is Maui's, believe it or not. And we're going to start in the bad section. Maui, what is bad and what is so hot we had to start the show with this? Where are we going?
So the biggest failure through stage 3 for me is undoubtedly Navi not qualifying for the playoffs. This was a total lock. I would say that when I looked at, Dualism, Phoebe, she did social media for G2. I think she's done some articles as well for things, but she's on Twitter at Dualism97. She always, every major, keeps track of practically every influencer, even international players, or really, I mean, from different backgrounds.
Right.
And everybody had Navi. Like every single person has Navi. Whether
wow,
that's a 3-0 pick or a qualifying pick. I don't think I looked at it again and I didn't see a single person not have Navi to make it through. So them not making it is just, it's a disaster for them. I mean, given the season that they'd had so far, you would easily say that they were the second or third best team at worst for the season. Obviously, Vitality's number 1, and they're one of the few teams that even beat Vitality this season. So for them to not qualify, you got to point some fingers. You have to you have to play the blame game a little bit here, because can't put any blame on Bit. That's one guy that's just untouchable throughout this. But everybody else had up and down moments, and I'm just going to say it what it is, because I was propping up MongolZ tremendously as he was on the rise with Navi. I feel like I was one of the earlier pundits who was just beginning to say, this guy is the real deal. He's next up. I saw improvements in his game on a regular basis. From the very beginning, where I would say, too aggressive, would not know when he should stop sometimes, to very, I'd say, more calculating, was able to pick his fights a lot better, realizes that he can play a whole round out and doesn't just have to fight for the first 45 seconds till he dies. This was definitely an off tournament from him. And I'm also going to say that a lot of people are going in on EMA. I'm going to hold reservation or hold a little bit judgment there, because I actually think that Blade had a really bad problem throughout the entire season. It got a little bit better at the tail end before this event, but I think that the veto system, or the vetoes for Blade, have really been off all year. There was a time, I'm pretty sure that at Astana, around the time, it was Rotterdam. Around Rotterdam, they had a sub 50% win rate on their own map picks throughout the season to that point. That was crazy. They did alleviate that statistically because they went to Atlanta, where there was weaker opposition. They lost their map pick only twice at that event, but other events prior to that, they had a really hard time figuring out where they wanted to go in the veto, because they went from Mirage being their pick generally to Ancient being their pick. And then what we see in the final series versus G2 is they pick Inferno. And I think that that's one of MongolZ's worst maps. I think it actually statistically it's kind of in the middle of the pack, but he wasn't really feeling too great on it at this event in general. I think that it's so questionable to me when you've had a guy who is the best player on your team for the season, who, by the way, every time MongolZ had a really bad Cologne, but every time he was on Ancient, he was still really good at this event. Every time he was on Mirage, he was really good this event. So this was a guy to me that was dependable, but then you put him in a situation where, let's just be real, younger players similar to Kyosuke do not play Inferno. It never comes up in high level Faceit elos. I even look back at MongolZ's pug stats going into it. He had played in the last 90 games of Faceit. I'm pretty sure he only played Inferno one time It's like they just don't touch that map there. They're spamming Mirage. He's literally playing Overpass and Nuke more in Faceit games than he is Inferno. So to go to that, I mean, not that I think Blade should involve Faceit stats. A little bit probably is on Magnojez himself to make sure his veto in Faceit games goes to actually what he plays in his matches. It's crazy because he's literally playing Overpass more in Faceit, which is their permaban, than Inferno, which is a map they literally play. So I'm just getting on both of them a little bit here. I'm not saying you sell Magnojez. I'm not saying that you kick Blade. I just think that this is a surprisingly weak performance for them at the Major, which has upended many expectations of what was building to be an extremely competitive playoffs. Still is, just that missing Navi really hurts it.
Yeah, I'd kind of be in agreement. I think that it was, a bit of a nasty taste in terms of the end of the teams that we get for playoffs in particular. I don't know. Navi, it's weird as well, right? It felt like they were really ramping up, and you look at how the past, even just like 3 months have gone for them and the way they've been placing. Rio was a little shaky, but it seems like with Atlanta getting the win there and, beating out Vitality, yes, it's got this whole kind of caveat behind it with Vitality, but like it just felt like they were in a spot to really, really work well from here. But I don't know, man. They have a few maps in there, the Dust 2 in particular. They're really just getting like dismantled on this map a lot. And I think that a lot of the top teams, especially that you get now in stage 3 with the best of threes, are going to be able to look at a map like that and just, punish you on it. And a lot of these areas where it does feel like you're quite punishable, they're missing a lot of direction as a team. Navi as well, like you say, with, Magnojez and some of the picks around that. Wonderful is ramping, but still kind of inconsistent for me. So I think that Navi generally have a lot of problems. And it just feels like they should be able to, have solved them by the time that game 5 comes along. Should you be losing that game to Falcons? Probably not. The last map really, really difficult, but it felt like they kind of had things in their hands. A few really explosive rounds, I guess, from both sides, make it exciting, but it was just very, very weird to see things go into like the double overtime, especially. But yeah, I think it's a big disappointment that Navi have just not managed to make it through to the playoffs.
I actually think, because this will tie into something that was on Hot Take Point Mints, I don't know which one comes out first, but on that last series, the G2 one, I even think that veto, where basically they chose to play Inferno, but they could have just gone into Ancient, is actually like a vote of no confidence by Blade himself. Because if people don't know, first of all, Ancient, they would have argued, if you'd gone back in time a month, that that's their best map. Now, true, it's also the best map of G2, but if you don't know, G2's been losing it out the ass at this Major. Like, if anything, G2, by the way, themselves removed its second rotation, didn't even let it go to the deciders. So I actually think that's an example of where if you're Blade, that's a bit uncharacteristic, because one of the things about Blade teams actually is they're not Carrigan teams. He does really predictable vetoes. He just goes into his strongest maps because he's the prep guy. Like, normally if I'm Blade, if he believes in his team, it doesn't matter that the other team's good on a map. That's Blade's style. He just picks the map he wants, that he's got loads of prep on, and they run the system and then they win the game. But I think actually, I mean, we've gone over this on some of the shows, but I do think that Falcons series shook this squad, mate. Like, I think they know they weren't supposed to lose that one. They didn't even really lose it by, like, we were outplayed like better CS. Like, some of it was we were getting shot in the head or our players didn't win the round. So I think in a weird way, it did look like that sort of cracked Navi. And the reason that's so shocking to me, I can see why Maui put them as bad in this and seemed it's not like they bombed out 0-3, is because aside from Vitality, who we're all saying is the greatest team ever, Navi was the other lock to at least be in the playoffs. Like, you could say after that, maybe they would have had to play Spirit. Maybe they could have lost that, or maybe they would have had a hard time. But this team has been so fucking good for like 2 straight months. Like, they would never lose 3 times in one tournament. What are you talking about? No way. Like, it's actually, even the rare times they've lost, like the Rio you mentioned, that normally takes the other team being like a super firepower team, like a Spirit or a fucking Furia, and then they have to play some like 10 or 9 out of 10 level CS. Normally, for me, Navi's one of the best like elite gatekeepers we've ever had. To beat them, normally you have to play out your mind and play amazing CS. I think at this tournament, they give some of these teams a favour. Like, I'll tell you what, I actually do think for real, no matter what they say now, I think if you were fucking G2 going into that third map, that's what in the game the voice character would call squeaky bomb time, isn't it? Like, fucking hell, mate, that feels like you're heading on the way out of the tournament. And when you go out the tournament as G2, the whole narrative would just be, it was heavy god, and it's G2 that needs all the roster swaps. So, if anything, I think Navi and G2 swap positions in that sense, because now, yes, everyone is going to go kick him, what's going on with Wonderful, all the usual things are going to come up that they always have in the past, even though for me, I still think it's a fabulous squad. If anything, I would put it this way. I think they slightly overperformed in the season, and then I think they underperformed at this major. The downside is this as well. I actually can forgive the MongolZ performance to a mild degree. It's only his second major. Like, you know what I mean? He's still like a relatively new player in the top 10. So with that said, if he played anything like he did the rest of the season, they'd walk into these playoffs with. They should have beaten Falcons, should have beaten G2. It's like, I agree overall, it is bad. Like, there's no way to pit in any other way. Like, I didn't have them winning the major, but I thought they were like a semis lock, at least, depending on the bracket. Like, they were a fabulously consistent team. I even think this is actually one of the downsides of the squad that they've got. Even though it must be cool if you're Blade and Lexi B that you get infinity credit for all these results. Yeah, you get the results because we all look at your roster like, how do they win tournaments? Holy fuck. Like, in a weird way, you almost want a star player. You want someone to just go, yeah, but MongolZ every tournament has a 0.75 KPI. If that was true, it'd just be a lot easier to win matches as well. So I think that's the other problem with Navi is I think they make it too hard work for themselves. That's why I'm not against the idea, even though it sounds mad, that the team that was like second and won a bunch of trophies might have to change the roster, do a roster move. I'm not against it. Like, if you really want to be number one, it's probably true. Not even hating.
Yeah. I think they still lack like just a kind of tiny little bit to stay consistent, you know, like they should be beating Falcons, they should be beating G2. I think the fact that those two games, you know, you're absolutely right, kind of go back to back. If it's a bit separated out, if like Falcons was your first game, you still got a bit of time to recover against, you know, some of the easier teams. You probably beat G2 for that qualification game if it wasn't, you know, one day after another, like really hard knocks, I suppose. But yeah, I think that they just still the move or the sort of engine room, as I like calling it at the minute, you know, of that coach and IGL. It does feel like potentially they're one or two tweaks away, and there's a few names out there that might get thrown in very quickly after this major as being people to move in. I mean, that being said, I think this crop of players, it's like you should have enough firepower and enough of like a default game to beat G2 on most given days, and then you feel like you should have enough structure over a Falcons that are still playing pretty weird at the moment, you know, like also kind of inconsistent in a way and really having to lean on, in this case, Tessis, I guess, to bail you out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that, you know, Navi really should be able to still win those two games. So they have to be like disappointed in themselves. And yes, moves can happen, but it should have been a playoff berth for them at the very least. And like you say, maybe you lose out to that first round playoff against one of the overall tournament favorites, but you have to like put a nice little cherry on top of your season, I think, with at least the playoff finish for this major.
Regarding the future of Navi and possible changes, what sucks is that the players or the coach and MongolZ and Blade, I'm not touching them. They're way too good for this team. They've proven too much. I would say with player form, MongolZ throughout this season has just been their best player. So it's rather unfortunate that he stumbles when obviously this is the most impactful tournament through the year or through the season. But for long-term moves, I think that the ESL skit did some more foreshadowing there, you know, saying that it's Navi that are going to poach Frozen.
Oh, sure.
And I think that if
another one of the ESL
were...
curses where it always comes true. I told you those skits all come true, bro.
All the Falcons ones and everything playing out in that way. I mean, I think that if they got Frozen for EMA, it would actually be a nearly strict upgrade. Of course, integrating into the system is one thing, but I don't see why Frozen wouldn't be able to satisfy the roles and play at a more consistent and higher level than what EMA's able to do. The only thing that they would probably miss is that in the communication little tidbits from Navi, over the years, we've seen that EMA is an incredibly vocal secondary caller for the team. Sometimes even in those clips, he's making more calls and reads of what to do in the mid-round than even Alexi does. So that's a bit of a concern. If they went and I think that it probably, again, I wouldn't recommend they do this, but if even Navi says we're actually getting Frozen, but it's for Alexi to improve the firepower, and then they move Ema to some of the Alexi spots, and Ema just becomes the full-time caller. I just will say I'm not entirely surprised, but I still, again, I wouldn't recommend it. I think the better 1-for-1 today is easily Frozen for Ema.
Okay. Right, Skriv, what is your bad point?
Yes, well, I mean, we're, I suppose, picking on teams today, it would appear, the way that we've gone. Mine's not quite as spicy, but I think still, you know, we get to talk about some squads and some individuals. My bad point is the MongolZ season, ultimately, and their performance. And obviously, another sort of poor run for them at this major. Unfortunately, just not really impressing anymore, you know, and I think that they're one of these teams that are in a position that they're just sort of going to get passed by a little bit if they're not careful. You know, these guys have been together for, 3 years apart from Cobra Zero coming in. It's been a long time, a little longer for some of them actually. So, it's really an older roster now, I suppose, and they've not made many moves or many changes. And I think, I noticed a bit of an interesting kind of trend. There's a couple to note on. One's a bit more obvious, which is the Sensu move, obviously. But the second is just kind of when they like face off against a team and they pick up a victory, the next time they play that team, they tend to just get handled, and taken apart. So I think that they're not the freshest or like most creative kind of team, and just sort of playing around their style, what they think works, and then they stick with that, and then it doesn't work the next time, and they try and come back. But this season it's really quite rough, even if you're taking it back a little bit further from like the Austin Major. So with the way that I think it's starting to now separate out, that would maybe we count it as 2 seasons, capstone by majors and whatnot. And I think that when you take a look at like how they've been playing, where they've been placing, it's just not been really that good. And I think that there is like a severe fall off for this team. And this major, and the fact that they've not made the playoffs and that we're not even really considering them in the conversation massively, I think is that, this team might have seen its peak, and we'll have to be careful with, Mongolian Counter-Strike and where it goes from here, because I also think that they just don't have a lot of talent that they can dip into, and a lot of, players that they can rely on. Are they going to start trying to go international? I don't think that that's really the wave, because of the expectation they have behind them, as being like the premier Mongolian country sports team as it is at the moment. So yeah, really just kind of poor, even at stuff like CAC recently, not placing well there. It really, and that's a tournament where you would maybe expect them to do well. It's home-ish soil, and just the fact that, the other crop of teams there, they're just not placing well enough. And I think that they obviously, as I mentioned, I think it's quite evident, but we can still talk about it. It's just the fact that like Sensu has left a chasm that I think they've tried filling. 910's kind of stepped up a little bit more. I think Mazzinho has been, given the space to hopefully break out of his shell, but it's just not quite delivered in the same way. And like I say, there is a lot of that very, very dangerous inconsistency when they are playing off against a number of the higher end teams. The next time they face that team, you can go and kind of have a look, right? The next time they face that team, it really doesn't look good, So some really weak placings, and I think capstone by this major is just not the best sign for this team, and I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some serious moves for these guys in the near future.
The crazy part about it, I think, is like I do see a light at the end of the tunnel. They just have to make up whatever went wrong between Senzu and the rest of the team. I feel like it's more of an emotional fix than an actual, and obviously a player swap would be necessary then, sure, more than actually anything else, because just simply put, I mean, Cobra Zera, what they're trying to do with the rest of the team around him is they're trying to, I feel like some people are trying to make up for it in the aggregate. People are being a little bit more aggressive, a little bit, they're playing outside of themselves a little bit more. And I don't even think it's, with the exception of, I actually think this is a good look for 910. I actually think 910 has probably taken well to it. He probably could have afforded to be a little bit more aggressive in the past. So I'm glad that he's actually trying it, because it does seem like it's serving him. But then I think it costs people like Techno a little bit more. I think it costs people like Mazzinho a little bit more, who are guys that, well, Techno would run in just because the strat says to do it, but I think Mazinho maybe is playing outside of himself a little bit more, and then he's getting caught off a little bit more, which sucks, because to me, I'd say this, there was, for a while, maybe last year, there was kind of a rumbling of a take that a lot of people were sort of like lightly co-signing, but nobody was like totally exclaiming it from the rooftops, was that Mazinho might be the most skilled player on Mongols and even might be the best player in the near future for that team. But that just didn't materialize, because I think that with him recognizing that he needs to change his style, not just fill into it better, not just play it to a higher degree, but now actually legitimately change his decision making to make up for a lack of Senzu, it's actually kind of hurt him too. Doesn't help that the team has had every tournament. I think that the most important question is, how much did you guys practice coming into this tournament? That's also, that shouldn't be a question for a professional team, but it just seems to be the way that the Mongols has outlined how they want to take care of this stuff, where it's just that it actually just seems that they're comfortable being the number one team in the entire Asian region, getting that top slot. But now, I think, what is it? Isn't it because they are they even going to get a stage 3 berth anymore because of them not making it to the playoffs? I think that does that.
There was something about like Europe getting more spots as well. I think it might be like one slot for Australia
from Americas for sure.
Well, stage because of the lack of stage 3 berths or stage 2 berths, I think, because like NRG, M80, however many teams failed. The Europe took one from there, but I think now you won't even get an automatic stage 3 berth because you didn't get a playoff berth for them. So yeah, no, super concerning for the future of that team. I hope that we just see Senzu. And here's the craziest thing too, is that you bring in Cobra's era, and you think, and when we're fans or pundits or anything, and we're just seeing that, we're thinking, okay, they're just going to pick up another plucky young Mongolian talent. And I would say this, to Cobra's era's credit, I think his aim is at a tier 1 player's level, totally, but he just doesn't take all the same fights that Senzu took. He doesn't find the gaps in the defense as frequently. He doesn't find those nice clean 1v1s in the mid round that Senzu was able to find, where he can just put his aim on display. And the thing is that in terms of development, by the way, Senzu is a year younger than Cobra's era. Like that's another crazy aspect to this, that you're not even investing time into the younger player right now. You've let the younger star go, and you're picking up an older guy who does not have as high of a ceiling as Senzu. So there's really, like, in all honesty, there is, not even trying to make this a hot take, there's just no hope that Cobra's era becomes Senzu. It's just not going to happen. Like, there's no world that he suddenly makes the leap, because there's been little flashes, but like Senzu in every way, shape, or form, in terms of intangibles, literally his age, what he's already proven, all of that's just better. And it should just stay better if he tracks like anybody in the history of Counter-Strike really has.
I will say, go on, Skriv, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it's one of the things that sort of like culturally, playing in Asia, in Mongolia, you maybe have to catch these players kind of young enough before they really set up like bad habits and everything, you know what I mean? So I think that there might be a bit in there that Cobra's era needs like a good year or so to really get used to the system. And then when you're not like coming up as a 5, are they just putting him in and expecting him to know almost how like tier 1 international games work, and not explaining it as well, rather than it being like this big long journey that all those guys went on together. So yeah, I think there's a lot of like almost the Counter-Strike culture that's very different out there. Seeing them play domestically for many years, it can be very, very wacky, let's say, and just kind of no rules almost, and very aim heavy. That's a lot of how Asian Counter-Strike goes. So yeah, a little bit worrying if they can't like figure that out themselves, and then Cobra's era just has all these bad habits that aren't going to be slowly built out of,
I did a recent episode on my YouTube channel of that roster mechanic show I do with Loz Raposa, the guy who does all the round swing, dual swing, is his, and a lot of like stat stuff. And he's a quant, if people don't know, he's like into like machine learning, and he's an expert, etc. And one of the things that was quite interesting, because what I like about that show is sometimes I get like the confirmation bias of something that I had to read in the games, right? And then sometimes it's like an angle I didn't even know, actually, like if you compare like how a player plays in a role to a different team, etc. And one of the most interesting things about the Mongols episode that we did like 2 weeks ago is actually what Maui's saying is basically confirmed. Like, they didn't take Cobra's era and say, you are the new Senzu. Here is everything Senzu did. Actually, they've made him somewhat limited, and he does do some, like, aggressive rifling, but he's not like the player who's like the star player of this. It is actually the case that it looks like they have, like, spread it around the rest of the team, and it's people like Mazzinho and Techno in certain spots that are in position to do more in the game now. Also, I agree, 9-10 actually has shown me something. He's done that thing where when the other star leaves, you have to step your game up, and if you don't carry it, you have no chance. You've seen it in these last few tournaments. Like, he's one of the reasons they're in these games. Like, he actually, fair play, he's gone from, I thought, a bit over it to actually one of the better AWPers in CS. Like, he's fairly reliable. The issue I have with their style, though, is if you have to think of teams that play their style, it's people like the Foots of the world. The issue they have is Foot has way more firepower, though. That's the issue. I do think the problem you have in MongolZ is, I like the style of play. It's good for upsets, but it's really hard with this firepower to, I think, actually be an elite team. Like, I think it's why in normal tournaments, if they just make the playoffs, that's good enough for me. You did a good job. Like, I don't think I can expect much more from you. If I put you against any good, like, top 5 team in a playoff match, you should lose it. You don't have any maps you're super duper world class on anymore. That also went with Senzu. You don't have a player that's super world class. 9-10's a good AWPer, but he's not like what Senzu was on the rifle. I told people Senzu was a player that looked like a lock. He's going to be Hitch on TV top 20 every year if he was on this team. Like, it really was the piece you built around. And so I do give still a lot of credit in this team to people like Blitz and Mara. I also think Blitz, you're allowed to play a bit selfish as the Agile. You don't have the pieces, man. I don't think those other people would frag in the same way in your team. So I actually look at their team and I think they're in like a tough spot. It's why I actually think, even though they didn't do well here, I think just making the playoffs, they would have got instantly bounced by anyone, in my opinion. I think even like rising teams like 9 would have gotten here right now. Even they would get you with the firepower and certain edges they have. So my biggest problem is I actually agree with Skriv at the end. I'll phrase it this way, right? I'm a massive Oasis fan from when I was a boy. But what's funny is I wasn't actually a fan of the idea they'd do a reunion, because my whole thing was like, look, if you're Noel Gallagher, who's the one who left, if people don't know, if you really think the other guy's a dickhead, and you already made your bazillion jillion, by the way, he has like mansions, he lives wherever he wants me, he has one of those royalty deals where they're going to play Wonderwall forever in every pop and every TV. He never has to ever be in that band again. If he really doesn't want to be with his brother, he thinks he's annoying, he can just say, fuck it, I had my time, it was like whatever, 10, 15 years. The rest of my career, I'm going to do what older musicians do. I'm just going to chill, I'm going to be at a smaller level, and I'm just going to do, my gigs with my fans. I'm going to do new material. But here's the problem. The reason why it was inevitable he would one day do the reunion is because no matter how good an album Noel Gallagher writes as a solo act, there's a certain type of fan that's like, I loved you in Oasis. I haven't really kept up with the solo stuff though. So the analogy here is this. I get the vibe that in MongolZ, they're doing like what Blade did after Simple. You know, when I did my Reflections interview after that year when Blade had won everything with the NAVI team, he basically made the implication like how much actually I'm more proud of winning the major without Simple than I'm winning it with him. Because obviously it's more of me that gets shown, isn't it? Instead of people going, well, you had Simple, he was the best player ever. It's like, no, it has to be some of like what I did in the team. Look how I structured this team. I won with lesser parts. I won when I wasn't expected to win. That's kind of cool. The problem with that is it gets old after a while. Like that worked for Blade because he was able to still stay at the top and still be relevant and win trophies. If I'm Mara and Blitz, look, you're going to get all the props for all these wins if you do any performances, if you get any deep runs, if you ever even make another major playoffs. But here's the difference. Like Noel Gallagher, you do know that if tomorrow, though, you actually called up and just said, let's just fucking put the beef away, in the same way as they did. If you don't know, the second Oasis announced that, by the way, they were playing like Wembley, the biggest gig in the whole fucking world, with like and also instantly sold out, prices through the, essentially, it wasn't some like pipe dream. They really did know at any point, if we ever just say, fuck it, we're back. Am I wrong, guys? I agree with Skriv. All I'm doing right now if I'm MongolZ is we go home, we just schedule a private call with fucking Senzu. We're all on the call, and all we do at the beginning of the call is how you do business. You just say, whatever we have to talk about in between, we can go anywhere else, we can go how the team's struggling, but at the end, we all have to agree that the end result is going to be Senzu's joining our team again. Because like my analogy, if they actually announced for the second season Senzu was back, bro, I'd even argue they could be better. 9-10 looks better now. The others have all learned from the experience. They've all been there. Surely now everyone would even appreciate each other more. Isn't one of the reasons we're all loving the soap opera at Falcons that it actually feels like actually on some level Nico's having to acknowledge like actually the Carrigan is a pretty dope caller actually, isn't he? Like, you know what, maybe I underestimated him years ago. Maybe he is actually the guy that I needed to play. That's kind of a cool cool narrative. And if they ever win, they'll be glad they did it. So if I was Mongols, fuck all this noise about like, and how do we work this plan? But yeah, but Senzu did this. Listen, unless he literally did something criminal or fucked up sexual or something, just figure it out. Whatever it is, no matter what argument it is, no matter what diva moment. By the way, even if it was a diva moment, I think he's earned that. Hasn't this team shown that like there's a reason why you have to accept divas sometimes? There's a reason why the stories go that like Ronaldinho could be like pissed drunk and come in, because if he scores 2 goals, he scores 2 goals, mate. No one else can do that in your team. So every star player gets a little bit of diva treatment, a little bit of leeway. That's just true. So I'm with you, Skriv. I would just figure it out. Like why do we even have to make it harder for ourselves? Let's just get back to the top. We could literally be winning trophies, boys.
It does make you think. It does make you think, though. You kind of mentioned something in there, you know, maybe as a bit of a throwaway, but why Senzu's maybe not had bigger offers. So
sure,
perhaps there
certainly.
Is something in there,
yeah.
you know, that is a little, you know, behind the scenes. It's a little bit like, well, I don't think you want this guy. You know, there's something going on.
Yeah, but then wouldn't you also say, here's the difference? Maybe if we're like Navi and FaZe, we can go, we don't want this guy. If you're Mongols, you don't have a choice. You don't have the alternative. You know what I mean? You don't have Frozen you can get instead, or whoever the fuck you want, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Like that's it. I always find it coming up in the conversation.
Oh, of course.
When Senzu jumps around, it's like, what did happen? Does anyone know? We just got that?
Because I'm with you. We've all just decided we have to accept he can never be in the team again. But I'm like, wait a minute. I would contest that. Why can't he be? How bad could it really have been? Again, unless he was like fucking Mara's wife or something absurd like that. What could possibly be this bad that he did something illegal? What could be this bad that he can't ever just play in the team again? Come on, boy.
You'd assume that would have come out.
Yeah. Also,
as well, though. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's a bit of like downtime.
Put it this way, I'll tell you something similar. You know how to this day it's never leaked why Shuhei was kicked from Mouse? I'll tell you the reason if you want off air. It might not even be true, but it's not even that sexy. Like if you heard it, it's just not the sort of thing you'd say about someone, believe it or not. It's nothing super sexy. It's something quite basic that's a human failing, and basically they just didn't want him in the team anymore. Like I have a vibe like you, mate. This story would have been huge if he'd done something crazy. I feel like it would have leaked out. Surely someone would have said by now. You know what I mean? Surely one guy in the Mongolian sea would have let it slip and it'd be out. To me, it almost implies it was just something like they had an argument, and it was like my dad, Mara, and he's like, well, fuck you, kid, we'll do it without you. You know, like, it could just be as simple as that. Remember, he's quite a young guy, Senzu. Hasn't been in the team a million years. Anyway, since we're tearing teams up in the fucking bad section, let's just go to mine. Because my take is fucking right on the money. You know what? I've been waiting all fucking season for this one. So I'm eating good. Even though I hate when great players have hard things happen to them. Brother, that fucking PARIVISION 0-3-1 run was fucking... First of all, he could see it a mile away, mate. It was like signposts on the motorway. They tell you miles before you get there. Also, secondly, this isn't even like they just had a bad tournament. This is who they've been for the last, like, month and a half, 2 months or something. They've been super scoffed. I'll remind people. Like, this is a team where they started the season unbelievably well. Like, obviously, they had not only the blast run, they had that final right afterwards. These are all massive results. But here's the part what people seem to forget. Bro, they were at that PGL Bucharest, that foot one over Astralis. They didn't even make it into the top 4. They finished top 8. They lost to MongolZ, the team we just tore up, by the way. Like, this is a team that's just fallen off such a massive cliff. It's ridiculous. And then you look at them at this major, there was just nothing. There was zero gas left in the tank, boys. In fact, the major went even worse than you ever could have imagined. Here's why. Because in this major, the only 2 reliable pieces on this team is Jame and Zwei. Even they played like shit. They had a really, really bad major. So this team already was slightly underpowered firepower-wise. They're another one of those teams where when I did the roster mechanic episode, basically half the praise went to the RGL and the coach. It was like, it's the structure. It's how they like limit the decision-making of the bad players. They just sort of tell them on a time and running on this time. And until that moment, they just stay quite safe. Like, they're not even playing high-level CS for me. You look at the map pool, by the way, they have one map that's over a 50% win rate. They have Dust 2, that's it. You think of all those maps, like, if you think this season of the GM Masterclasses, you're talking about like Inferno CT side. You're talking about some cool Mirage moves. Those aren't even like world-class maps for them. Like, even, so that means basically GM has to call a 10 out of 10 Inferno CT side, or we're just not even good on Inferno. Then we're not good on Inferno. That's not a real fucking win condition that we have to always outgame and outthink the opponent. So I think this team is just cooked. You've also seen it in the interviews, isn't it? Completely queued up that this is basically like the Belchanok versus Nota, who gets fired first, maybe both of us fucking run. This is like, that's almost the storyline coming into this major. And actually, without it's gone, maybe they are just both, who knows? Also, I just think of teams like the Bet Booms of the world rising. Magic is out there. You have a bunch of Eastern European talent. So if I'm PARIVISION, the reason this is bad is, one, it proves that this lineup isn't it. Like, they had their little moment in the sun, it was cool. It's not it. And also, I just don't believe this lineup will exist next season. I think it's just done. I think this is the end of this PARIVISION. Skriv, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a wild one. Like you say, they start very well. I think that, I don't know, maybe they look at their season on paper. They don't have a lot of, like, you know, ESL in there as I'm looking at this, but it feels like you've got a lot of events here beyond Krakow that are very, like, winnable. You know, do well at Pro League if you can, and then you move into your PGL, CAC, that kind of thing. It feels like you can place well because they're often the events where there's maybe a team missing or whatever. So yeah, I don't rightly know though, but the vibes were just absolutely awful. I know they got posted a lot and maybe overplayed and whatnot on Twitter and everything, but they were like winning games and then they'd lose a round and it'd just be like head in hands, no one really talking to each other and stuff like this. So I don't know what's happened. We had the sort of infamous Dastan death stare, you know, like it just feels like a very strange, maybe mismanagement of expectations. You've got some young players, you know, like you say, a team with time in the sun, but also you have pretty much the entire roster apart from James and Dastan. Yes, you can maybe have Sve in there a little bit, but I think his time on Spirit was not good for him mentally. I think you have like 4 guys here who don't rightly know what it is to push and to really play like at the end of tournaments and whatnot. So I do feel like there's a few kind of emotional issues and just too many expectations on these guys that you have to slowly ramp up. And it's like, okay, we won this one, we placed well at this next one, let's just try for a playoffs at, you know, the next event and then see where we go from there. But maybe they are really setting their sights on something a lot bigger, and that's kind of hit them in the wrong place. I don't know. Yeah, Nota came in. He was like, you know, fully buzz cut and everything. So it's like really strange at some of these events, just where like the
army or something.
It was a bit weird.
They shipping him out. What's going on now?
He's rebelling against his parents.
The fuck?
I don't know, man. You know, and it's just like after like Dastan, we know is very, very hands-on, you know, and maybe a little militaristic, I suppose, in the way that he likes to run things. And it seems like James stepped away a little bit from like all this typical James style, but still it was very, you know, what was it after Blast? It was like they hit B 70% of the time. I think it was you, Maui, that, you know, noticed that and made that tweet and everything. They just kind of bullied certain areas of the map, and maybe these things get figured out and then they just didn't have much of a game plan beyond that. But the main thing that I notice is like, yes, they've struggled keeping that level of form. I might argue that's a little bit expected with some of these players and just not being able to figure out how to peak and trough that effectively with their sort of lack of experience doing that at the top level. But the main thing for me is just where like the mental headspace seems to be. It's so evident that they're either falling out or just way stressed, or because this was also the story coming into this year. They'd been boot camping in the same house for a year and a half, and so maybe they've just really gotten to the wit's end of all of that and not taken enough breaks, and it's just kind of crumbled in the worst possible way at this major.
This is one where I don't know. I've been told for so many years that in Eastern Europe, talking to your players like this is fine and acceptable. I don't know. I don't think it is. I don't think like. I'm not saying Dastan needs to go woke. I'm not saying he needs to start having human resources look over his shoulder with how he confronts his players or anything like that. But clearly it got to them. The body language on this team was the worst I've seen of any team ever. Every single round Yellow dies. His whole face is in his hands. It was the same way that I would say Zwei looked when he was on Spirit, where every round he just looked totally depressed, totally deflated. Every mistake was so magnified. All of the players, Nota, Ziello, even Belchanok, all 3 of them look like that nearly every single round. And if you're getting that, that means nobody's probably talking after they die. And that is such a valuable aspect to Counter-Strike when you have someone that has like an overseer live viewpoint of everything going on and can say, hey, wait, yo, in a post plant, we have one more smoke. Let's use that. You know, like molly this, hey, flash for them to peek that, set up plays for them when they're dead. But I think everybody's they were just completely checked out. I mean, I think that it really shifted so quickly for us from, wow, Dastan, you give really candid, serious interviews, to, okay, I think you're just blaming your team for every single thing that goes wrong. And you're not even, I don't even know if he was taking accountability after a while. I don't know if anybody was taking accountability after a while. It just felt like these bad players are not tier 1 players, and thus we will beat them with a metaphorical stick, and then basically into submission. Because at that point, they were not only submitting to their own coach and probably IGL, but the other teams too. And that's just unacceptable. I'm curious at what PARIVISION does in the offseason, what kind of moves they make, because it's clear that they are going to make some. But what they did at the Major was just so disastrous for the cool dark horse that was emerging this season. It's just completely dead.
By the way, the Dastan style is that famous saying that goes, beatings will continue until morale improves. Whereas, like, obviously the gag there is, surely the morale improves when you stop beating the guys. Like, I guess all style just says, you did everything wrong. It's like, oh, fucking hell, boss. Okay, can I do anything right? So I know what you mean. That's definitely his style. It's why I told people at the time when everyone was loving it, like, you're going to hit again. If Zonic said any of that shit to his players, mate, you'd all want him cancelled. Like, you'd say he was a bomb who was like abusing the players or something. So funny how people change their tune when you lose instead of winning it. And then lastly, I'll just say this. If you ever go to the classic FTU page on HLTV, which is all the team stats for the top teams, etc., they have some of the worst stats just across the board. One of the only things they're half decent at, by the way, is actually like nade usage or something, which implies that like actually Dastan and Jim do their job. But across the board, all the stats you'd want, like opening kill percentage, 5v4, they're bad across the board. Trade, almost everything is like way below the levels you'd imagine. And you can put it for the whole season. Like, if you ever look back, it's the other way around. I don't think people will look at this major and go, oh my God, PARIVISION is 0-3. They'll look back in history at this roster and go, how the fuck did that roster win Blast Bounty, go to a final, have a top 4 at a Blast? Like, that's the miracle. Is how they did do it. Like, I'm not even dissing them. It's just obviously this roster is Dunzo, boys. Like, you can't keep it going. There'll be no point. Like, it's run its course. You've also seen the flaws of some of the players. Like, it's time to actually bring, here's the thing, it doesn't have to be a massive one. I think it's at least one player, though. You've got to change at least one player and bring one better player in who at least knows a little bit about how to play the game and probably has some firepower. Luckily, Eastern Europe is fucking full of those. There's a bazillion people who speak Russian who can do that. So I think it's a very solvable problem also.
Yeah, I mean, you are right, though, like the sort of beating into submission, because they're straight out of this into that XSE Pro League thing. So they're not even getting like a player break, really. That starts in a couple of weeks. So like, I don't really know what to make of it. And I think as well, in terms of the move conversation, like PARIVISION, I'm a little wary. I think the way this team might have been built is that, you know, they put a lot of, especially from like an organizational standpoint, put a lot of trust into, you know, Jim and Dastan and try and get them to build something. And they have slowly risen and then, you know, suddenly crescendoed at the start of this year. But I don't know. I hope that the org is down to, you know, put some money in and make some moves and maybe get someone a bit more interesting to just replace some of the lesser players on this team at the very least, you know. But I do worry that it's like, if they don't start putting up results, the whole thing, they might just let them naturally filter out, you know, into wherever they end up, if that is back in like the tier 2 VRS grind, playing in those 100k lands and things. So yeah, I do definitely worry there might be a lot more behind what's going on. I had an interesting conversation with some of the 3D Max guys. I know this is like wildly off to the side, but they were asked by the org to, like, you know, make moves. They weren't happy with the results and they didn't want to make those moves. And now look what's happened. You know, I think that this is another org similar to that, birthed from tier 2, where they can get some of those management decisions like disastrously wrong, and, you know, the whole thing just falls apart. So it's one to keep an eye on in the off season, which I guess they're not even going to have. So, you know, we'll find out how it goes.
Look at, also, by the way, I could even have done that angle. The idea they all live in the same house, which is the Vanguard style, as far as I know. That's going to be great when it's working awesome. It's going to be a nightmare when it goes badly. You're just trapped in the fucking house and the guys don't even get a break. Like, you're just there with the person judging you all the time. Yeah. So I also think that's why we don't do team houses anymore like that. We all live in separate countries, and that's actually a positive, not a negative. That after the event, you go back to your family, you let off some steam. Okay. Luckily, I didn't give a fuck about PARIVISION. I never ever thought they were going to win this major. I didn't have them anywhere close to making the fucking playoffs. But speaking of teams that I did, did, how about check out our special Cologne t-shirt here, which we've had designed, where basically we've taken the animal representing all the different teams. Luckily, Navi doesn't have an animal, but we took the bird of Ukraine. They're out anyway, don't worry about that. All the rest of them are all the contenders that are in the playoffs, all the big names that you'd imagine. Look at the animal representing their team. They're all battling each other on this cool design here. You can support Last Free Nation and the creators of this show by buying one of these. They're only for a limited time. It's till the end of June. Obviously, by the way, if your dad's into elephant for years, fucking Father's Day is coming up. Weird angle there, but whatever. Maybe you are Anders' child and you're watching this show. This only heed this advice, but your dad might like the shirt. It's true. It's kind of cool. Obviously, you can buy it in most countries in the world. We do ship. If you're in the US, though, if you spend $60 or more at the shop, you can also just get it free shipping, which I know is a big deal in America. So go to www.last3nation, all one word, .shop, and you can buy this jersey for a limited time only to support us. And in the hopes that in the future we can do other ones and we can get even cooler designs and we can do other abstract things with it. Okay, let us go. That was the bad section. So now let's go into the good. Let's actually get into some good shit. So Skriv, what's good at the moment?
A really nice way of turning it around. We've kind of ripped into some teams that have not done very well at the Cologne Major. My good point is feeding into the Cologne Major. I still feel like, despite what we've talked about, it's pretty stacked. It's worked out quite well in terms of the playoffs. We've got like that good mix of the surprises, and also, of course, like the contenders and the teams that you expect to be here and hopefully with a bit of spirit and their energy. But I also just feel like, one of the more joyous occasions is just the fact that like the energy around this, with it being Cologne, the first time that we get a major there in a decade, the first ESL one in 4 years. I think there's a lot of potential here. Say what you will about Rio. I think that from like a fan perspective, it was a very, very enjoyable spectacle, especially if you were Brazilian, I suppose. But ultimately, I think that this has potential to be like another great event. And if the games deliver, especially from like the semis onwards, I think that we could be in for one of the best majors ever if, ESL are able to land that slam dunk. So it's pretty simple, right? I think it's a nice one to open up into. But that's how I'm feeling on the good point. I'm maybe a little bit biased. I've just finished my packing. I'm going to be there, so really, really excited for it. And I think that it should be a lot of fun. And I think that the games, like I say, have got that good mix where we could get the spicy game, that semi-final on the top side especially could have like this hero run for a 9Z, maybe a bet boom. I'd probably go a bit more towards 9Z myself. But yeah, I think it could be very, very exciting if all the games deliver.
It shook out pretty well in that we got 5 of the best 6 teams there, and I would say that the 2 bigger underdogs are ones that at least they've kind of played themselves into it. I'm actually kind of glad that it is. One of my good points is on one of those underdog teams, so I'll hold that one. But yeah, even just the way that, say, like Bet Boom have played themselves all the way from stage 1 all the way to the major playoffs is super impressive. I mean, you got this kind of like cool story there where, and I think that it in a good way, it continues a lot of the lineage of Counter-Strike. I think that's something that always is really one of the best aspects of CS, where even though you have these underdogs, they're not complete nobodies. You have a couple young stars on the teams, yes, but Max has been IGLing for 9Z for 5-ish years, and then you have Boomich, who's won his own trophies in the past. So even those guys are cool in their own sense, and even G2 as another underdog, they weren't really. I mean, they are definitely underdogs. This season hasn't been great for them, but you have a lot of more household names. Even the organization itself is more household. I'll raise concern. I'll say this though, in terms of having all the best teams there, I will say Budapest it couldn't have been more stacked than that. You had teams 1 through 7 there, and then the one underdog you had was FaZe, who had, they're just such a fan favorite. And unfortunately, I think in a weird way, the Budapest playoffs didn't really play out as competitively as people would have wanted. Like there were like half of the games were 2-0s. Actually, over half of the games were 2-0s. But so I'm just hoping I'm almost hoping this time, even though we don't have the perfect seeding, or maybe all of the top teams make it there, like we missed out on Navi, at least I would hope that we get some 3-map just thrillers, because that's what the group stage has provided us so far. There have been some unbelievably tense and impactful group stage matches, like all 3 stages. The final series of the stage is just some nail biter. Thinking of the NRG big game through stage 1, which was just legendary in its own right for the fact that it was the biggest comeback, and you literally can't have a bigger comeback in Major history. So I think that there's been a lot of really, really great moments in that sense, and I think the group stage has actually gotten me more excited even than the seeding or the teams that made it.
All right, I'll tell you what I'll do. First of all, I do think it's a really stacked playoffs. This is also why I'm glad that we've changed to like VRS means that you don't get wonky teams in stage 1 as opposed to stage 3. They're in the right stages. And also, surely everyone can agree after that stage 3. Best of 3's the whole way is fucking awesome, isn't it? Like, as much as it might suck for NAVI that they didn't make it through, they can't bitch though, can they? Yeah, maybe you had harder opponents, but those are all BO3s. You had a lot of chances in those games to come alive and win and prove you were the second best team and make it to the playoffs. And you would have made it there if you'd have been the second best team. You weren't. So I think overall, here's how I'll run down the narratives. I actually think we have some fucking banger narratives. Like, if you think about it, last year, most people just thought like FURIA or Vitality could win the major. I know people like Pimp and me push maybe Falcons can. That was like in a dream world where everything went perfectly. They've never done that as a team. They didn't do it there. It was all, so realistically, it was just, can anyone beat Vitality? No, okay, I guess Vitality wins the major. That wasn't actually that cool a narrative in the end. It's only because they had the struggles during the season. If I'll run down the teams in the playoffs, I can give you some bangers. So first of all, Vitality is going for history. They're going for the 3 in a row to tie Astralis for that. They want to, look, a lot of people have said it. The second they win that major, a lot of people who haven't yet done it are going to crown them the greatest team of all time. That's a real storyline that everyone's waiting for. It's almost like the coronation bracket. That's why it's even fitting they have to play all these really hard teams. It's going to make it even better if they win. The last couple of majors, they've played some kind of sus teams that every now and then they've had the odd like round of 8 draw that wasn't so hard. Now they actually have one that's dangerous on paper. Spirit themselves have the whole thing where they don't have the coach, so it would be miraculous to win. But if they were somehow to win or even just make the semis, haven't they kind of justified those massive roster moves they did coming into this season? Like, remember, people are forgetting this. Cause Donk's awesome again and Giro's still good and Magic. People forget there's no Chopper. That was what everyone who hated that roster move said. They were like, Chopper's the IGL. People are like giving Chopper enough credit. Who gives a fuck about Chopper anymore, by the way? No one. Even if Spirit doesn't win, no one's going to bring Chopper back. The roster's worked in that sense. I think that's a big one. And you have Donk playing out of his mind. And I can tell you right now, if you think about it, he must be horny as fuck to win this major to get back in that race with Ziwu. That would be a really amazing way to do it, wouldn't it? Beat him and then get back in the race. Then you've got FURIA. All of a sudden, I feel like before the playoff draw, everyone would have said, well, you know, I mean, I guess FURIA, if they get the game together, they can play a top 2. The second that draw happens, it's like, bro, they should be in the finals. Like, they might actually, for real, on paper, have to beat one world-class team to win a major. Doesn't that make the whole fall and last dance way more fucking sexy as a narrative? Bro, he could win a major on the way out the door. I think if he wins a major, I've said this on shows before, if they actually win a major, I don't think he can retire. I think he has to do one more year. Come on. You can't get to the top with the fucking squad 10 years later and then go, I won't even give it a go next year. Mate, if you win the league, I'm sorry, you come back for the next one, you try next season. You wait till you finally lose, then you fuck off, you know. So if you win this one, I think you should be like, second season discussion should be like, maybe I can even stay, fuck it. Maybe I'll just keep playing and then when the second I lose, I'd drop out. Falcons themselves have the whole crazy Carrigan angle. Yeah, it's a Hail Mary, but as you've seen in some of these games, there's a reason they did that Hail Mary. If there's any one person at the majors is the fucking Willy Wonka magic man, it's Carrigan for whatever reason. And you know what he's done? He's started to do it again. And by the way, if he beats Vitality here, fucking forget FaZe bullshit. It was Carrigan bullshit all along. It wasn't about FaZe, apparently. It was just him on it. Then you've got Aurora. Mate, Aurora was bought. A lot of people didn't even have them making the playoffs. Thanks to their own bracket draw, there's a world they could make. If people don't know, Aurora's never won a playoff series. They had that one way back in Copenhagen, they lost to NAVI. Like, you'd look at this draw, they could themselves make the semis, as they're probably a favourite to. They could even make the finals themselves. Could you imagine Aurora with this roster, which all the rumours say is going to break up? At the moment, every interview they do, they publish one today, every interview does that thing where they don't deny the rumour. They just sort of make it, well, if there is, well, I wouldn't know. Oh, well, besides that, we're all focused on the get that. Then basically read between the lines. That implies this is probably the last roster. This is its last tournament. Like, no matter what changes are coming. Mate, if you make a finals run, I think that makes that so much more interesting. Like, if you do change the roster, what happens? Maybe it even attracts bigger names to come. Maybe they really can get some massive names to go there. It's not just another Turkish player. So I think that one's sexy as fuck. I won't even do the other one. ones, because I think it's so unlikely that 9Z or G2 etc. win. But as you can see, you've got some pretty good narratives already across the board there, and you've got some good. So I'm with you. I think it looks a banger, mate. A little bit scuffed to get here because the format situation, but I think the playoffs should be amazing. Should we have some really epic games?
Yeah, definitely. And like I say, I think just as a spectacle as well, I think that'll kind of enhance things a little bit more. They always knock it out of the park with Cologne. It kind of maybe at times knocks itself out of the park, like just the prestige of the event and the way that like the crowd is, especially, if you've had the pleasure out there of going, like it really is for the Counter-Strike. You can go to the odd event where it's like, oh, okay, we're clearly on like one team's side here and we're supporting a nation or that particular player because of where we are or whatever. Cologne is very much like, whenever there's big kills in big rounds, everyone in the room, it feels like, understands Counter-Strike quite well, so they kind of know that extra 10% of where the bigger rounds are and things like that. They follow along the game just that little bit better than some places, and I think that does make a difference. And we'll see, like the on the ground, the space all around. I hope they do a lot with that. They usually do a bit of outside work from a broadcast perspective, but I hope that they can maybe do a bit more filming around that, with the shop and other things that they might have set up. So we'll see. I think that because of that, it could really, if the games do deliver as you're sort of setting up there, and we're all quite hopeful for every major, really, I think that it could, etch itself into a lot of memories as being one of the great majors if things all work out. But it's, all about the Counter-Strike at the end, I suppose.
I could get into my good point here now. You kind of mentioned the bracket, and obviously I think the surprise for a lot of people would be, well, BetBoom's one. That's not my point, but the other is 9Z, and I held out. I held out for a while. I didn't technically put 9Z on my pick'ems or anything like that because I wasn't sure if they could do it again, because Astana definitely caught my attention, and now with them qualifying for the major playoffs, this team to me is legitimized as a top 10 team. I'm not going to go over crazy. I would say next season, I would definitely say that they're going to be kind of a fringe playoff contender if they keep this 5-man lineup, because I'm not saying that they're always going to make the playoffs or they're always going to pull off these kinds of upsets, because people are going to pay a little bit more attention to them. They're probably going to game plan for them a little bit more specifically because they know they can't just run over some random South American team. This team is actually legit enough that you have to begin to anti-strat them a little bit more. So just going into their achievements in the past 3 months, or the wins that they have, and why this already this would be, if you took off the nameplate here and you said there's a team right now that beat Legacy, that beat the Mongols, that beat PARIVISION twice, and then you start kind of going up the ladder on the achievements, and they beat Falcons in a BO3, they beat Vitality in a BO3, they went to 3 maps, all 3 maps go to overtime versus Spirit, you would without a doubt say that this is a great team. But there is obviously hesitation from the community and people in general believing that these guys are legit or good enough. And I get that. It's hard. It's especially hard to think that a team is legit. Like, a lot of people held out on the Mongols. A lot of people didn't think that the Mongols were good until they really started winning trophies. And yeah, that's totally fair, because teams from different regions are going to play differently. So even if you do watch them, your eye test is going to be kind of in the air a little bit more, like, what am I actually seeing? And yeah, it's also just hard to wrap your head around the fact that a team like this is a group of guys that, practically speaking, with the exception of DGT, have no experience at this level. I mean, Max has been part of that 9Z core for an extended period of time now, and basically what that 9Z team was always good at was they get one upset win a year, like one a year maybe. They got to the Dallas playoffs. They actually, at the Blast Showdown in like 2020, I remember they basically retired RPK. If you look at RPK's last official match in a real tier 1 jersey, it was versus 9Z as well. But that's kind of all they were ever known for. But this actually seems like they've made a move that has propelled them. And yeah, part of it's due to the players. I mean, Luchov is in a form right now that's just really hard for teams to deal with. I mean, it goes without saying, if you have a strong entry fragger, that you're going to basically turn rounds on their head relatively quickly. But I also think that the setup for this team strategically is really solid. I mean, it isn't to me just Luchov run in, go kill people. They're throwing a variety of smokes. They're very slowly sometimes starting rounds. Like they just wait out opponents' utility, then they get into their action for the play. It's not just him fighting all of the time. There are little aspects that I think are unsustainable. Like I think Wasso Peak, I've never seen him play this well ever. So, and he still doesn't even have a great rating, but the amount of vital kills he's getting in games is extremely impressive. But if I'm looking just at the core of, say, Max, Luchov, and DGT, who I know is proven, given that he made it to the major semis as a totally serviceable contributing player for Pain Gaming in not even his first language, then this team is actually working with a very strong trio. And so in a way, I almost just want to give praise to that trio, because if I'm being serious, Mayerin is probably a player in the offseason you're considering, do we just get try for this team? That being said, I think 9Z are super exciting. I'm very happy that they made it. I'm glad that they were able to build on their last Tier 1 tournament as they were able to make the playoffs in Astana. And it'd be actually really cool for them to just put an immediate end, say, Fallen, we don't care about your retirement tour. We're going to put an end to it now.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this team as well, honestly. I was definitely worried for them after Astana. I caught them at that stake ranked. I was casting that, and, Neo and I had the displeasure of casting their game against Sharks, which I will, not forget for all the wrong reasons. Probably one of the worst BO3s I've ever cast in my life. And
I think I actually watched that one too. I watched that one too, and that's what made me hesitant about putting them through, because I was like, there's no way Koala should be frying 9Z. Like that just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it was difficult. It was difficult. Like even on the live broadcast, it was difficult, man. Like, but yeah, and I think that they obviously pick up in a really good way into the major, which is great. We maybe did have like this light theory. I think also the phase game that they played at stake ranked wasn't great, and I think we were a bit like, are they trying to like hide tape here or something? They just don't want to have to really dig deep to try and win these games. It was a bit strange. Got their sights set on something bigger, and obviously it paid off into the major. But yeah, I think a really great run. They also, for my money, potentially should have won the game against Spirit. I think you're looking at Spirit on a great series from them, but I think that 9Z will be pretty disappointed that they weren't able to close things out a couple points in that series. Obviously, you make it through to the playoffs, so in the end, it maybe doesn't matter too much, but we'll see as things go on. But yeah, I really do like 9Z. I think that they play a great style. I think as well, this is a team that has got to be a little bit careful about the underdog dark horse kind of curse, which I think can be that you might have been overlooked slightly in some of the earlier stages, and now you come into the playoffs and these teams will be much more heavily prepared and respectful, and you have been actually using all those strats and everything. So we'll see what they do under the test, and I think if they can pass this one, I'm kind of with you, Maui. I think that I'm always a little more apprehensive. You are a guy that tends to be a bit more first through the door. I'm a little more apprehensive to like put my money where my mouth is. So I think a little bit more for me, and then we can maybe start that conversation around them being a serious contender into next season. But we talked about MongolZ, for example, and I made the point of like they're a team that are going to have others pass them by. I think that 9Z are a team that are going to potentially be able to do that, in the way of, and maybe like a foot as well that are not here. And apparently there's moves coming in that team, and everything. So I think that 9Z, if things remain consistent and they get a semi-final here, a pretty big win in front of that legendary crowd and everything, that'd be really important to them. Then I think into next season, maybe a move, but I think you wouldn't touch anything if you make semis. Like that would give them the belief and just the evidence to start pushing and maybe find playoffs consistently. And it always tends to be in those kinds of regions as well, especially I think South America more than anywhere else, where they come together with a project, and if it starts working, they will kind of stick with it. You see how long it takes for like MIBR and Pain and these teams that can knock on the door, pull off the odd upset against higher level teams. It takes them a while to make moves, and they really do start believing in projects that find success and not wanting to touch anything. So yeah, if they take down FURIA here, and maybe even a winnable semi-final for them as well on that side of the bracket, it could be a really, really great season for them, and just a sign of better things to come for 9Z. So I'm kind of excited. I think they play a very fun style to watch, but we'll see how these individuals do when like that pressure is fully on, and now you've gone from being a team towards the bottom end that it's like, okay, yeah, we have a vague idea of how they play, but our own game should be enough to beat them, right? If you're one of these large teams, and the expectations are a bit higher for teams like Spirit or Vitality or whatever it is. But now that you've taken those two teams close or beat one of them, everyone's kind of going to be looking at you a little bit, and they might even be borrowing some of your rounds and things like this. So it's going to be a very, very different looking playoffs, I think, for 9Z. So I hope they're aware of that. I hope they're ready for that.
I don't buy this team at all. This just looks like the bullshit one-off run that will never be repeated again. It's appropriate they called 9Zs because y'all must be fucking dreaming. That's how many Z's it is, mate. It's not even the first threes. Normally you just sleeps like that's like the sleep apnea comes and then everyone wakes up. You go, oh shit, wait, I almost died there. Fuck, 9Z being good. No way. Right, I'll tell you, I'll immediately attack it. Right, first of all, obviously it's not just this major, is it? But Thorin, what about PGL Astana? Right, here's the two big wins they had at PGL Astana. They beat Falcons and they beat Maus. Get ready for the fucking prosecution lawyer to tear that apart. That was Falcons' first ever game with fucking Carrigan, and that was the second game of Maus with GL. So already you have two teams that are brand new, semi-new rosters that aren't even properly prepped. Then they go to the playoffs. Magic, Magic must be fucking goated, man, because they just fucking took them and body slapping time home. They did. They 100% did. They 100%.
That was Major and choking. He literally could have won the game, but
so the guy who plays with the AWP, the most expensive gun in the game, he just sucks dick. I agree. That's why they're not a good team. You're right.
Yeah, the team is good around it. Marin's the weakest piece easily.
Okay.
If they get try, this team is a serious threat for your one team.
I agree with you. They can try and be a good team, but right now they aren't. So anyway, listen, I can fucking work all day on these desks, mate. This is light work. What are you talking about? It'd be like playing against this team in a PGL Astana quarterfinal. Easy. I just wake up, get out the dream world, and then I win the game. Inception, bitch. So anyway, here's the other reason why. There was an event in between that Skriv just mentioned there. Maui didn't mention it at all because it would just go against his point. If you don't know, they went to a tournament called Stake Ranked. Must have won it because none of you even watched it. Did they fuck? They lost to Sharks. They're fucking terror-bad. And they lost to FaZe. The fucking bomb-ass FaZe that no one gives a shit about, that don't even look good. They lost to them too, by the way, this land. So I think they had a glow up at this tournament. Luchov played really awesome. By the way, spoiler, if Luchov leads this team tomorrow, you're never talking about 9Z again ever in your life. Like, that'll never be mentioned. There'll be an irrelevant team. So already, that's a glow up. Even then, he's a 25-year-old player that just woke up recently and went, now I'm really good at the game. That can happen. Every now and then you get a really weird case like that. I don't buy the rest of the team, though. DJT's fine. He's all right. Mayan, by the way, actually sucks. If people don't know, a lot of people just remember him from MIBR when he was like the young up-and-coming rifle. He was the Kai or the Skulls, as it were, their team. He's the AWPer now, and he's actually bad. He's a bad AWPer. So I'll give Maui one area, which is this. If they keep Luchov, I could buy that Max is a good IGL. It looks like actually he's not working with that much firepower. If people don't know, even this run now, where they've had, I agree with Skriv, they actually could have beaten Spirit, by the way. That was like superstar player from Spirit, won them some of those rounds they had no business winning. So they could have beaten two of the best teams in the world. The problem is, after having an amazing glow up stage 3, they're still like the 7th ranked team by firepower. You know, everyone's telling me every day, you can't win with Carrigan. Carrigan's Falcons is a 1.07 rating team. Fucking 9Z, who's the best thing since sliced bread, is a 1.01 rated team. So that means Carrigan, with all universe bad fragging, can't drag his team down. They're still 0.06 above fucking 9Z on a rating. Like, that's how scuffed the firepower is for this team. So cool run. They definitely got, those are real wins. The Vitality win is real. The Spirit win, I almost count that as a win. That was almost a win, but quite frankly, it was extra performance. The other ones I'm a little bit more skeptical of. I want to see what happens in the second season, because I think what happens in the second season is you go to a couple of tournaments, you don't make the playoffs, and then all the people who are hyping them up, like every other fucking into the breach, fucking Apex, you just stop mentioning them, mate, and then no one now has to bring up that they suck at that point in time, and they just go back to being whatever. Like, right now, there's also a lot of South American teams that are good. Like, fucking Legacy is good. They might even be doing that Insane move. So I don't know. My problem here is this. I'll put it back on Maui this way. Okay then, homie. Ball's in your court. Make some predictions then. Will they win this playoff match here? Will they make a deep run here? Can they make the finals here? What happens in the second season? If they keep this roster, do they get any results? Like, if they're a good team, if they're top 10, what does that mean for them going forwards? Give me some predictions. You'll get a chance to look awesome if you're right.
Well, they're playing a FURIA team that is way more stage ready. The one problem with 9Z, as they've proven, is that Marin's a choker. So, and Mayern is their worst player. So obviously that's going to be pretty hard to play against MongolZ, even if he has some of his stage nerves. I feel like he's going to still be able to find enough opportunities versus them. I'm not predicting them to actually beat FURIA, but the form that they've shown against Vitality and Spirit is leaps and bounds better than anything FURIA has shown at this tournament. FURIA in a 3-0 has beaten pretty all teams that have just not made it. So that's not really even that impressive of a run. It's not that, they beat Bait. No, sorry, they did beat BetBoom actually. So they did actually beat a BetBoom team that's pretty hot right now too. But I don't think it's more to me, are they going to make a move in the next season? If they keep Mayern, I'm going to say that they're going to win a couple series. They're going to be one win away from playoffs in multiple tournaments. If they get Tri and they actually upgrade it, which they, for all intents and purposes, 100% should. Tri was the guy on this team before. I don't know where Tri is going. If Tri is going anywhere else, then sorry, 9Z, you're probably going to be stuck in this kind of like 11th in the world range. But if they get Tri, I see them breaking within the top 10.
Okay. Right, I will now go to my good point. And my good point is, I'm not actually going to say BetBoom as a team, because this isn't a real team. If people don't know, they wouldn't actually have sent this roster. They would have sent Siren, and there would be no Flammer and they'd be working with their other rosters. But I'm going to just pick, it's 3 players on this team. I think it's just really good. It's an excellent event from all 3, and it actually bodes so well for their careers in different regards. So the first one is the guy who's been the top-rated player. It's Magnojez. If people don't know, he's actually the least famous name on this roster. All the rest of them are experienced, been in top tier, a bunch of them had major runs. This guy, though, is their best player, and he is a really good player. As people have seen now, like, he's just a very legit talent who probably should already have been beyond the level of this BetBoom. Like, if actually PARIVISION is going to be good, this is the player they should consider. If Spirit in the future ever needs a move, this is a player you should consider. This is a player who could work in your team. Like, that guy just looks like a stud. So I do think he's proven himself now. People know who he is. He's on the map. Then the other 2 players are Flammus is a stand-in. People have to forget that. And it's even worse. When he stood in before, he at least stood in a way that made sense. He's now standing in a scoffed way where he's not even like the main Flammus type role. Like, they're sort of shifting around because Siren's roles are the ones that had to be given up. I think he's just shown he's just a very good player, mate. He really is one that was like hard done by the bullshit of VP and then the fact that OG's irrelevant. Like, this guy should be on a good team. He could work on many, many teams out there. In fact, he played on Game Legion implies it doesn't have to be a Russian team. He can speak English too. And then the last player is obviously, if you watch another show, you'll know why this is referenced, but it's obviously Boomich, isn't it? Like, what a fucking sick redemption arc for Boomich. And if you couple this with what he did in that Cloud9 major where he made the top 8 when they had no AWPer, I do think he's proven at this point in time he can work with many different types of players, he can get the best out of them, and he knows how to play his own game. So I actually think these 3 players is just good. I don't know what downside there could be to these 3. They're all in different circumstances, shown at very good performances, and even cooler, because they've been through all 3 stages. They're not even on, like, I can't even diss them like I just did 9. See, they've been through all 3 stages, boys. They looked excellent in every single stage, for real. I think they've had, like, 1 match they didn't look that good in. That's about it. Aside from that, everyone, I think, smurfed in this team. So I don't even need them to by the way, they could do nothing in the playoffs. They could lose that. I don't give a fuck. I think these 3 have killed it. So that's my good, is that trio of Flammus, Boomich, and Magnojez.
Yeah, a really interesting kind of team. It lets me highlight something that I think has been quite clever. Obviously, those guys that you mentioned kind of coming together, I think, as a core of look good. They've been on that sort of tier 2 grind, but in the past maybe 6 to 12 months, right, they've been doing this thing, Monty, sort of similar. I don't know if you'll like this, Thorin, but what we tend to talk about a little bit is the idea of VRS maxing. And it's something that they've been like very, very, very good at. And I think that has kind of paid off. They've been getting a few more invites than Monty, maybe like, into your PGLs and things like this. I think winning qualifiers to get there at times. But essentially what a lot of these tier 2, tier 1.5 kind of teams are noticing is that playing way down, like in your CCT or maybe like a Nodwin, some of these names that get thrown about the more league format kind of events, they have to be very careful, because if you lose a game, you're a bit tired or you've just got back from the LAN and all this kind of stuff. If you lose a game to like a team that's quite far down, like rank 100 or whatever, you're going to lose so much VRS. And I think it becomes like way tighter towards their bracket, and if they lose 5 places in that kind of top 20 or top 30 bracket, that's obviously massive. Those are types of invites, but that can happen in like 1 game if you lose to the wrong team. So they've kind of been shaping up playing a lot of these lands that they've got out in Russia and over towards Kazakhstan and stuff, where you maybe have a few less international because of, the whole situation and what have you. So they've really been like working in a smart way, and winning some of these tournaments, or even placing like second or third at a LAN, is really going to boost your VRS and everything. And I think that you kind of worry about teams like that. Monty did okay here at this major, I think, probably punching up a little bit higher than a lot of people expected, to be fair to them. But BetBoom have really, really delivered. And it's something that, like, as a pundit from that sort of scene, that I worry a bit when they go up against the bigger boys, as it were. Are they going to be able to deliver? But this seems to be a team that, like, just has maybe moved away from what we touched on with PARIVISION, where there's like all this really aggressive kind of management style, and it can be very, very difficult on the wins and the losses. These guys have been playing with standings. It might, yes, be for this major, but I think they played like the stake ranked with 2 standings. The Roman Imperium, I think, was with 1 or 2. So they've had some really weird like visa stuff going on, and their full roster's not really been in. So it has been about the core. It has been about Boomich and the calling and trying to work that around. And I think it's a really like positive place to play, good energy, quite loose, able to slot people in. And they do a lot of like looking at the way the cards have fallen, where it's like, okay, who is really carrying, who is really playing well? Let's give them most of the resources here, like even per map. And they're just able to like adapt really, really well. Sometimes that is Boomich, as it was in like stage 1. Sometimes that is Magnojez, and whatnot, which is maybe the player that they try and get it towards most of the time, but it might not fall like that. Someone else might just be a little bit hotter. And I think that makes them a really difficult team to deal with, because of how versatile they're able to be and how they're just very, very adaptable in their games. And that's made them a difficult team to put down. But also just got to bring it up, because I think there's a couple of the teams here that have done well with that. Like Monty is another one. Sinners, you might say as well. Like, these tier 2 teams 6 months ago, with the odd big LAN here or there, have done very, very well at like working out the VRS system and just using it in their favor, let's say. So I think it's really, really paid off for this crop of players and the org behind them and everything as well. And it's just sort of it scratches an itch in my brain of like just really crunching those numbers and being smart about how to get invites to big tournaments.
What's even more promising about BetBoom moving forward is that as far as I know, they didn't even want to play with Zorte throughout any of this. They wanted to play with Art Frost. So that guy, imagining that he's any percentage better than Zorte, this team would be even more ferocious, because Zorte throughout all 3 stages of the major combined has a 0.95 rating. I mean, they're not really. He's not really an asset to this team right now. So the fact that they're still able to convincingly make it through the other 2 stages, 1 and 2, and then squeak by a foot team that was seemingly hot enough that most people had them to make it through this stage. That's it's all just extremely impressive. I mean, I've said a lot. I mean, if people, I've tweeted about Boomich on Hot Take Point Made. I made a point about Boomich, so I'll move on from Boomich for the sake of this one. Yeah, the Magnojez has just been, he's just been on a complete tear. Because when he came into this BetBoom team, I didn't really see it as much. You had these barely little moments, I guess, of he's talented, he looks skillful, but I just think that him under NAFI versus him under Boomich is just kind of a night and day player. I think he's just now found way more consistency. I think that the impact that he has in games is just so much more at the forefront of the action, whether he's running in first or second. He just gets to really stunt on people so much harder. The whole kind of narrative also of him playing a lot of face-it games early on with Donk. I don't know if he still does that, but they still had that funny little friendly banter at the major itself where Donk said, "fuck you," and Magnojez said, "I love you." Like they still clearly are friends with each other. And I think that it also is kind of it speaks volumes about how when you're playing it just face-it games amongst the best people on such a consistent basis, you're not going to just like that experience and being able to firsthand see him play, getting to hyper focus on what he's doing around you, has probably he's picked up on some of those tendencies to sharpen himself as well. So I think that him as an individual makes this super cool. I really think that if I don't know how they would put this together exactly, but if you're able to somehow, I think you really just kind of work with what you've got right now. You forget about using Siren, even though Siren has been historically that sort of supportive element. I just feel like there's been too many dips in his career too regularly. Like, I'd say there's always a 3-month span where Siren's like flirting with a 0.89 rating, and that's just not really going to cut it for me. If Dilladez and Flammus share responsibilities there, to me, that might just be a little bit better. You make Magno your primary star. Boomich still is the experienced leader, but then you upgrade Zorte for Art Frost. This team is extremely exciting, and I don't know, like, and I think that it's almost just the way that Art Frost's career has gone, where he's replaced by Shiro on Spirit, and then he got replaced again. I mean, this one's for visa issues this time. He's just kind of had this unlucky career, but it's never really felt like he's been bad. So it's just kind of like, it's akin to Knock on a couple of his rosters where he gets first replaced by Device. How can you blame him? Then he's replaced by Simple on, or was it Simple, or was it what was the second team? Like, yeah, no, wait, what was Knock replaced on recently? He got replaced by Device, and then he got replaced by another guy, and it's like, you couldn't really blame him for, BC Game. Yeah, it was Simple, right? Yeah, it was literally Simple. He got replaced by Simple on BC Game. He got replaced by 2 of the GOAT oppers, and if I'm Art Frost, I got hit by a visa issue, and I got replaced by one of the greatest oppers in the world today in Shiro. So it would be cool to see him turn it around once the visa issues are all sorted out.
Yeah, basically, as far as I can tell, Donk just is tsundere, as the kids who watch anime say. And also, yes, Art Frost has been screwed over. No cap. But he would obviously hate if I said that, wouldn't he? Just a little piece of law about Art Frost. He's the new Taco for whatever reason, Not least because, Taco was acting like a little pussy. So the slang was on point. Art Frost, also a little pussy. Fair enough. Well done. Maybe just grow the fuck up and understand you're losing your hair and just frag people in the game, you mad fuck. Be like my boy Pimp back in the day. He was a fat little meatball, so he used to just destroy you inside the server. He was like, in real life, I ain't shit. I tell you what, inside this world, I'm like it's the Matrix, bro. This is Ghost in the Shell. I'm down like, I am Project 2501, Pimp Fat Fuck. I will destroy you in the game because I don't get pussy. Like, yeah, it's a brilliant way to kill people. So Art Frost, forget about it, mate. I don't care if you thin it on top. I care about if you've got substance in the server. And obviously, in theory, he's actually also a bit of a choker, but whatever. No, that's also why I said separately, because this roster's not continuing. It's not a real roster as far as I can tell. Like, I actually don't even know. They haven't even signed Flammus. For all we know, he immediately gets called back and he never plays them again. So I just think you have to big up all 3 players. Right, the last section of the show we now arrive at, and it is obviously the ugly point, which I was just leading into there. But Skriv, what is ugly right now?
Well, I've gone for, and kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, just the fact that like the player break feels like it's not being really honoured at all this year. I think that we kind of get little touches, some years it's like, that one feels like it maybe shouldn't be happening or whatever, but then you see that it's like one team in like the top 20 is there kind of thing. But I think in this newer like VRS era, as it's starting to get figured out, a lot of these, tournament organizers are going to use it as an opportunity. The big one is the XSE Pro League, which is the one that I've mentioned previously. But there is also, you can kind of count the Draculan in there. There is a stake ranked happening as well that is just out the other side of it. I think, maybe some teams might argue that would be at the end of their player break, but either way, it feels like, with big tournaments like this and VRS opportunities, I think it's pretty dangerous actually, in terms of like where invites are going to be for some teams, because you might have some of your like bigger organizations and whatnot typically, but don't quite have the VRS, and they're going to be taking breaks. But then some of these teams we've been talking about, man, Bet Boom, 9Z, big, right? Obviously getting a bit of a boost. Monty, PARIVISION, who maybe arguably shouldn't really be competing with the way that they've been playing in Tier 1. Well, they're playing in the XSE Pro League. Stake don't have their invites out at the moment. But there's also, like I say, the Draculan going on, which still has a bunch of invites yet to go, including like their wildcard invites and things like this. So, that could end up being some bigger names that are happy to go along to those tournaments. Maybe Draculan are still waiting on people to accept invites based on how they perform at Cologne. So it feels like this year in particular, the player break is not really being respected. I think it's something where, like, you know, the CSPPA, if it was still around, would obviously like be a little annoyed at this, I think, especially having a tournament with the $1 million prize pool. Like, that is a real big chunk that's going to have a big effect for some of the names that we've mentioned in that tournament. And I think that it will allow them to sort of turn around and maybe soften a slightly poor finish to the season and whatnot, or maybe even really double down when it comes to like BetBoom and 9Z, who might finish brilliantly here at Cologne. They're going to have a massive boost, and then they don't have to worry about next season. And then they end up, you know, getting invited to tournaments, and maybe things do start going south and they're not placing very well, and so on, right? So I think that this is something that maybe VRS was hoping to do away with, is the idea that teams that don't deserve to be at tournaments aren't at tournaments. But something like this, allowing these 1.5 kind of teams to join in, it's not purely them, but to join in with some, like, you know, VRS abuse, I think is not really great for the scene. And it also just doesn't quite feel right. I think that we should have a nice international break that is really, you know, end of the major until whatever is next. And it kind of needs to be honored just also further down the line to stop the orgs and things. I'm sure PARIVISION, those players probably do want this time off, but you know, the organization's probably turned around and said, nope, you go into this one. We need the points. We need you to be getting these invites. It's your job on the line or whatever. And I think that VRS doesn't have a space in which players can kind of look out for themselves and avoid this kind of thing. And it just feels a little bit dirty. Like, I don't think it's a bad point, because it's probably going to happen. It's something at large. And it's like, well, if the opportunity is there, obviously I'm going to run. If I'm Draculan, I'm going to run my event and hopefully have a nice couple headline teams to really boost the level of my tournament, get more people watching. Everybody loves Counter-Strike, you know, Counter-Strike 24/7, all that kind of stuff from a viewer perspective. And hopefully that will allow them to boost their numbers and things like that. But as a system around VRS, and just also the fact that there isn't anything to stop this from happening, whether it is like that player team union, or it is like a Valve coming in to say, well, while we're having a little bit more of a hand on the scene, we do need to have like quite a clear break just to allow teams and tournament organizers and everybody else to have a bit of time off, because otherwise it can get kind of relentless. So yeah, it just feels like a little bit disappointing that there is this gap here, and that there are just some of these tournaments that don't seem to be too bothered about the player break, which again has been slowly breaking down over the past few years. And this feels like the first year that we have like some serious events going on. And then who knows, into next year, might see a few people turning around looking at this, and then suddenly we end up with 2 or 3. I think we had Fissure last year, you know what I mean? So it's like we might have 2 or 3 big tournaments in the player break next year if people aren't doing anything about this.
I am at least thankful that most of the top teams don't attend these kinds of ones. I mean, the Fissure Playground 1, which happened during the player break, the only top 10 team that attended it was FURIA. Actually it was FURIA and Pain. They both were at it, and they were 9 and 10, rough respectively. But yeah, I think to me, when they run tournaments during the player breaks, I feel like and this is obviously, yeah, I work the event, and so I have a certain feeling on it, but I felt like the perfect things to run during the player break were essentially the We Play Academy League type things, because what I feel like having events during the player break does is that it undermines the prospective longevity of players who want to continue playing this game later on into their lives, because you want to have a work-life balance as you grow older. And by having that, well, how long is even the player break? Sometimes it's like 3 weeks. It's like 3-ish weeks. Yeah. So if you don't give the older players that sort of time, and then, you know, things at home get a little bit rockier, or you're not able to settle down and just kind of like take care of what needs to be taken care of in terms of like home logistics, then it could just kind of lead to like one of the reasons he seemed like Simple had a big problem and why he had to take a sabbatical was because he had just like a handful of things he needed to take care of logistically, not beyond just the fact that he didn't like. I think people just would say he just abandoned them, and yeah, he kind of did at that EPL playoffs or whatever it was. But at the same time, or the Australian event, the Sydney event is when he didn't go to it. That was one thing, but it was that it just was like he had once more details came out, he had so many different things he needed to take care of at home, because that's so difficult to do if you're on the road for 200 plus days a year. I don't think people have always the perspective there of what that really, what having 3 weeks at home twice a year does for you, is that it allows you to just settle so many different lingering issues with your kind of, life admin responsibilities. So I think that young players are always going to look for ways, and young organizations are oftentimes going to look for ways to get a leg up in the space. And so this XSE Chinese event, or the Pro League, XSE Pro League, that looks to be an opportunity for some of the orgs that are kind of teetering on tier 1.5 to get a leg up going into the upcoming season. But at the same time, it does set a bad precedent in my eyes, because I'm looking on a personal level, and on a level that I want the best players to continue competing for a long time. I want the best players in the world to feel like their spots are at least secured for a 3-week period, that they don't have to do some catching up, maybe just a little bit into the upcoming season. But this is $1 million tournament. Like, the VRS implications are going to be substantial of who wins this one. So that's really concerning. Like, and Fisher was the same. Fisher was also $1 million tournament. Like, it's a huge draw, and so it's very difficult. And it's just kind of a gray area right now that I think a players' union would likely solve if they are all going to stand together and say that we're not going to attend these types of events at this certain time. But there's always going to be the people that defect, and that's going to lead to maybe this rat race that is just going to be like you're on this always just perpetually spinning hamster wheel where you're just constantly on the run, going from tournament to tournament to tournament. It's like you win the major and you think, okay, cool, we're gonna chill out for a little bit, but like in a week's time there's like another $1 million tournament. That's just crazy. I mean, it just becomes to me not sustainable. It's unsustainable for some of the people in this space. So I'm not a fan either. So I think it's a great ugly point.
The problem with this topic is, as you all said, the framework and the mechanism by which you can do this is, remember, we used to just have one player break a year because it was just implied you got a mini break at Christmas anyway. So it used to just be around like July, August. That was when it was. And now we've got the two where we've made seasons. We've even got Valve to fix it. So like the majors at the end of the season and all these things we all wanted. But one of the downsides is this. That was one of those things that you need a player union like CSPPA to enforce. It's why there's a famous saying in politics that goes, the reason you have to guard your rights is because when you fight and you win a right, it goes away as soon as you stop doing that, basically. As soon as you stop giving a fuck, it'll just get taken away from you. And once it's taken away, it's a real battle to get it back again. So they had to fight for many years to even get a player break, where, yes, the whole point of the player break wasn't just the pro players will be on holiday. It's that they're going to be on a holiday because they have to be. There's no tournaments. Everyone agrees at tier 1, no more tournaments over this break, and no one ever violated it. People might have run right up to the day after the player break, but no one ever violated it. Here's the problem, though. One, there is no CSPPA. Pro players don't give a flying fuck. And by the way, they've given up way more than they ever won with the CSPPA now. Like, I think that shit with club share is mental. They've just allowed their own team to just get like half the fucking prize purse. Like, before that was where you had, that was a battle that was won. All the prize money went to pro teams, and teams had to figure out separately, a Lufa agreement, a Blast partnership thing. That was a separate business deal. Like, players have given up so much because they still make out like bandits and they're still just playing a bloody video game. So my problem with this is you have no CSPPA. There's no one to fight for this. So if you don't like this, there's no one even to police it. I'd even say this, it's actually way more different than in the past. The reason this isn't a pure violation of the player break is, aside from when Skriv says, yes, if a Fisher Playground, which was one that did it last year, if they run their tournament, they will put a lot of prize money in. So that looks like a tier 1 LAN. The problem is, though, Fisher Playground isn't Blast, it isn't ESL, and it isn't PGL. So they're actually not part of tier 1. They're not. The point of the player break was for tier 1. It was never anything about tier 2 and tier 3. In fact, I'd even say, this is why I agree it's an ugly, not a bad point. It's really scuffed. Because I'll give you the example. We're all bemoaning now. What if some team has to play this tournament and win or lose? They have to go straight to these lands instead of having the player break. Yeah, but some of those teams won't get the tier 1 invites. They have to do that. Unfortunately, VRS incentives actually mean they should attend some of these lands if they can get easy wins, easy prize money, and get some invites to other bigger tournaments. Like, it's one of the problems I always had with this approach is it could only ever have worked at tier 1, because if the tier 2 team doesn't go to the big lands anyway, why can't he play in the off-season? Like, that isn't his off-season. His off-season is when he has 3 months where he's just playing online games, mate, and he's back home and he doesn't get to go to a land. So unfortunately, that only exists if we're going to make tier 1 a thing that's like enforced by, in my opinion, Valve. You almost have to make tier 1 like Formula 1 or something, where there's a set number of races, they're on these dates, and there's nothing else aside from that. There's no distractions, nothing else. But they haven't done that. Valve's just let these TOs carve up the tournament circuit, and for whatever reason, they're letting them do this. And if you also, another thing is, think about that Fisher Playground. Remember the teams that used that to make hay? It was Tai Lu, it was the Astralis, it was even the Bet Booms of the world. Like, these are the teams that at the time were perceived as, if you were the Tai Lus and the Bet, you better go to that land, mate. That's where you can actually earn a bit of respect. Like, otherwise you're irrelevant. You don't even get into the bigger lands. So I think that's always a problem already. And then lastly, I'll throw in another reason why these lands will continue to happen, Skriv, every player break. I'll predict that right now. Because another problem we have with VRS is one of the only downsides is it ends so far back from the major. It doesn't run up to, if people don't know this, a lot of fans don't know this. A lot of fans don't know why Team Spirit was in stage 2 instead of stage 3. Because think about it, right? At the end of the season, Spirit was in the final of Rio and then they won PGL Astana, right? If you don't know, guys, the Astana tournament didn't count. That was already over at that point. I think Rio might have even been slightly after the cut-off to make the major. So those VRS points don't qualify for that. That's why I told people, the moment FaZe failed to qualify for this major, they weren't like every fan was like, lol, your season's done. It isn't. Their season then got harder, because then if you're FaZe, that's why Twists was playing stake ranked. That's why Twists had to go to all these American lands, because he was trying to win VRS points for next season to get the invites. Like, his season doesn't stop because he failed to make the major. You can actually argue his season gets longer because now he has to keep playing. Whereas if he'd gone to the major and gone out to stage 2, maybe he'd be okay at that point. Maybe he'd get the odd invite. So I also think, unfortunately, this is a downside of the fact that we no longer, tier 1 isn't a succinct thing that's like got a barrier. Tier 1 teams come down and play these tiny lands. They go to Draculan, they go to these small ones, they go to the stake rank, they play because everyone's battling also for invites and for other status, etc. So I think, unfortunately, it is an ugly point, because I think it'll continue, mate. I don't think this will be fixed one way or another. I think you'll just have it happen every player break. And then again, teams that are opportunistic, TOs that are opportunistic, they'll run their tournament now, because that's when there's a space in the scene and no one's policing you. No one's going to bonk you on the head and say, don't do that. It just goes on talk shows. No one else can do it, though.
Yeah, and I mean, do like top teams actually, maybe like your top 5 that are pretty consistently there, but I think once you start coming out of that, you know, like 7 to 10 or whatever, I don't know that they would want to close this window, you know what I mean? Like, close this opportunity, because it might be something that they can use in future to their advantage. So if they complain this year and they're like, we got to do something about this, and my spot and my invite or whatever might get a little shakier if I have a bad 6 months. Well, if that bad 6 months turns into a bad year, then you've not got like anything to maybe panic bail you out at times, you know what I mean? So yeah, I don't know whether it's something that they really want to close off. Thinking about it, you know, doing a bit of devil's advocate.
Okay, Maui, what is your ugly point?
I actually want to change mine, because and I don't, there's no way you have this, so I'm gonna actually, I'll just do it anyways. I'm changing this one because I forgot this was a topic that I wrote down in my notes that I wanted to bring up on this show. So I'll just bring it up here, and it's actually kind of talking about the economics of tournaments a little bit, and actually kind of talking even a little bit about why, like, people, there's been this kind of topic for a while. Every time I bring this up, people get really, really frustrated about this, but I think it's actually worth addressing now even more than ever, because the point becomes more salient as time passes, that the prize pools, it's something that we never usually talk about actually in CS, are prize pools and prize money, because generally speaking, we're talking about the glory, we're talking about winning it, you know, the prestige, the legacy you build as you go for it. But the prize pool at the major is completely outdated now. It is so minuscule. It is tiny. Like, looking at the Cologne Major today in 2026, the prize pool is $1.25 million. That is so tiny of a prize pool in the esports world. And I'm not just, and yeah, there are some harder times and everything like that. But just for context here, at the Dota the first international, no crowdfunding at all. In 2011, they had a $1.6 million prize pool. If you scale for inflation, $1.6 million in 2011 is worth $2.35 million today. Why have the prize pools for Counter-Strike not ballooned along with inflation at the bare minimum? Because, and yeah, we have 2 majors a year. And so, but even if you take that, then you're just saying that you're using the exact same, all you did was you made 2 majors a year. So it scaled the Dota international prize pool, because the TI prize pool is almost worth, in 2011 was almost what 2 majors of CS are today. And if I even take it a step further and talk about, people are wondering like, why is American CS not good? Dude, the money is not even a remotely compelling enough incentive for these players to want to play this game anymore. That's the big thing for it. To me, when I was getting in this space, like $1 million prize pool in 2016 sounded cool, and it hasn't changed. In 2016, we had the same prize pool that we're basically working with today. That's in 10 years, like I think it scaled $250,000 with the inclusion from 24 teams to 32 teams. That's just so little that you've added more teams. You haven't scaled for inflation. And I think that the prize pool now is not enough of a draw to get the best talent to actually play this game. Because if I'm actually looking at prospective future, if I'm actually just a person in America looking at prospective futures of like, where should I invest ungodly amounts of time, life, and energy into something and make it my passion, I at the back of my head, I do want an incentive. I do want a reward. And I think that this is probably more difficult because a lot of people aren't living in this reality where if you're a kid in Eastern Europe, dude, a $1 million prize pool, if you split that 6 ways, is still like, you're a top 1% earner in your country. In America, you're barely scraping top 10%. And you want to know the most sobering fact? If you live in San Francisco and you win the world championship of Counter-Strike, and that's all the money you make, you're still considered low income. You're still actually considered a low income person, and you literally get benefits from the city if that's all you make, because you're not even considered to be like making ends meet. So that's how little actually the prize pool is respective to how inflation has ballooned, how the economy has changed over time. And so I think that people get really mad. It's like, where is the NA talent? They're doing other things with their lives. They're just simply doing any other things with their lives. And also, like, there's a reason that we're still getting the best athletes of all time every single consecutive year coming into all of the major sports, including soccer internationally, because the incentive is insane. If you work your whole life and you get that one, winning lottery number to become a professional athlete, your whole life, your generational wealth. You do not acquire generational wealth to be a Counter-Strike player, and yet it takes your entire energy force to even continue pursuing this as a passion. And so what you end up doing is you're investing in a skill set that is not transferable. There's no, like, putting in 15,000 hours into practically anything else is it may be a transferable skill and at least can go on your resume. I'm sorry, if you put that you played up to ESEA Challenger League or even played in a couple tier 1 lands, dude, nobody knows how to really actually frame that to even get a job in a world that actually exists beyond esports. So that's why you kind of just have to like go back into the esports world. And that's why you see so many people that are just, ex esports pros that just kind of try to move into the esports space, because the skill set just is not really transferable unless you have a degree along with it. So my ugly point is simply that Valve needs to raise the prize money. Like you need to make it look like the incentive for winning the world championship of Counter-Strike is actually worth winning, given the amount of time and effort that is spent in order to actually win it. So I think I think if Valve raised the prize pool to something like $3 million and the first place prize was like $1 million, I think we have a completely different. I actually think that the scene is so much better, and it's just a discussion we haven't had for a long time, because prize pools have relatively stayed static for about 10 years now in this space.
Yeah, it's an interesting kind of conversation. I think definitely when it comes to the major as well, thinking about in my head what like makes a major important, I think that you have the name value. of doing well. A lot of it for people tends to be like the storylines and the upset and the 9Z in this particular one. For example, the bet boom as well. Give everybody their flowers, but like just those kinds of things that the major always creates this sort of space for. And it's nice that they have done well to expand things a little bit. Sure, we still have a bit to do around format, but that would really increase the time that it would take, the space in the schedule in the year that it would take up. But they've done well in those kinds of aspects. But I think that, yeah, in terms of like the prize pool and increasing the prestige, it's weird. It's like you win the major to say that you've like won the major, but I don't know the maybe for your super low down tier 2 teams that manage to make it and get their sticker money and everything. But then I don't really know what's going to happen with that now. Like I really do think the funds for stickers and things are going to fall quite substantially because of the changes that they've made in with all these tokens or whatever. Like I don't know anybody out of like my friend group and stuff like that have actually sort of bought into that, where usually they would. So we'll see around that. And you feel like that kind of thing at the very least should feed into where the prize pool's going and whatnot. They had that system in Dota. I understand that they kind of have messed it up a little bit or whatever. I'm not super knowledgeable about Dota, but it does feel like on a flat basis we should have a bit of an increase maybe every couple of years, maybe as a reflection, maybe to say, okay, you guys as a community have increased the amount that you watch, or you've increased the amount that you've spent in the game, or the passes went up this major or whatever. And that kind of money you feel like should come back around into the esports space, at least from the Valve perspective. It's also like, these tournaments are huge for the scene. You look at how many people are watching like the early stage and the kind of viewership numbers there and the amount that it gets talked about, and the fact that I think we just more increasingly have people who play the game a lot, sure, but are not necessarily watching an Astana as we might have thrown in, or like the Blast circuit or whatever it may be. They will just kind of tune in for the major, and they might even tune in for like stage 3 and beyond, because that's where you have names like Zywoo and Donk and Munisi showing up for the first time. And it does sort of take a little bit of a hit to the scene at large. So you feel like this needs to be like the big moment, and then everything else nicely feeds into it. Which VRS is helping towards, I think, a little to start those storylines early. But yeah, in terms of like prize pools and things, it does feel we've not had that same kind of payoff, and we've not had a way. It's really great that the community might be able to give back in some way, and even just that doesn't seem to be there in any kind of fashion. And again, we don't have necessarily a number to put to like how many stickers sold and how much did a team make and what happens here, what happens there. And, is there any kind of accountability from Valve or the money going to those little teams that could, that made the Cinderella run and things like that. So, yeah, I think there needs to be like a rework in a way, maybe of how the prize pools work, or just to kind of increase things like every couple of years, it feels like, to just, and this is where like the competition element of the scene and the open circuit that we have compared to other games would be really great, is to turn around and go, oh, well, Astana has this amount of money. Sure, the breakdown might be a bit different, or I Am Rio has this, and, club share and all that sort of stuff. But we maybe need Valve to say, right, this is the biggest thing, so we're going to bump it up to 2 million just to make sure that it's right at the top. It's the highest prize pool. That's how it should be. That's how it'll always be. The majors are the best, so on and so on, rather than the fact that it is simply called the major being the reason that we all band together. I think it's a lot of like spokespeople and community people out there that keep the prestige of the major as high as possible, and thankfully players turning around and being like, yep, to win the major, that's what I've wanted to do since I was 12 and things like this. But no one's necessarily turning around and be like, I don't know, man, we make more money focusing on other tournaments and things. As soon as that trend maybe comes in, if it ever does, we don't know, but if something like that were to creep in, that would probably start taking a hit on the major and the prestige of it and things like that. So Valve have got to be very careful, I think, with how they play things over the next couple of years, just because there's other elements of competition between the big 3 tournament organizers that could mean, and it's probably why like ESL rarely get a major, because Valve are like careful to not tacitly or indirectly boost the prestige of their events year on year and whatnot. And I think that if Valve are not careful, some of the majors, it just we've had a good few hits in a row. It just takes like 2 lackluster majors in terms of the games, in terms of the upsets, in terms of maybe someone gets it wrong with the production. Looking at Fire Esports, right? Hopefully, touch wood for them, but there is potential there. Things like this could really knock the name value of the major down quite substantially.
I don't have too much on this one. I do think that one problem is this. If people don't know, the major prize pool for this one's 1.25 million. The majors have had $1 million prize pool since 2016 on, literally over 10 years ago at this point in time. So for me, it's not that they have to put it up loads. I'm not one of those people like, it must be higher. But I do think when you look at the rest of the scene, the difference is when they made $1 million majors in 2016, a lot of people don't know this. It's why all those stats are scuffed where people talk about big events. Big events on HLTV meant you had to have like $250,000 prize pool and above. So there are tons and tons of events if you go back to 2015, 2014. Like in those years, I think there's only something like 3 or 4 big events a year. Nowadays, by that logic, you have like about 10 or 12 like big events. Like it's way more. So, and Maui's right in a sense. We don't want it to go full international, where in the international, it became that like TI was worth like 10 times a normal tournament. So people went the other way. People used to basically just tank a whole season and at the end go fuck it. And sometimes even give up their invite and just go through the qualifiers. Because if we get the right roster just for TI, we make so much money, it doesn't fucking matter. And at the end of the day, we can just say that one event's the only one that matters. Right now in CS, we're at the risk of the opposite, which is we've got such a mega circuit in general that the major really is only a big deal because of the aforementioned reasons, which is one, there's no other tournament runs at the same time at tier 1 because it's the major, and then 2, you get to say you won the major. But if you look at it now, like you can win a lot of prize money without ever doing anything at a major now. That's how crazy the scene's become. You can become a gigabazillion jillionaire, and you could literally, if you just won all the events and no majors, within something like 2 or 3 years, you'd have overtaken people like Dupree who won 5 majors, bro. Like that's real. That's just how it would have gone eventually, because there's just so much more prize money in the scene. So I do agree. I think it's better if it's just always number 1 and if it has an extra detail. I'll tell you an obvious angle to me. I would go Dota 2 and I would add a crowdfunding element. I would have it where we're not just buying stickers to give money to that player. We're not just buying stickers because that team's our favourite. I would have like a component. You figure out what the percentage, could be 10% or something. Whatever, some amount of that goes into the prize pool. Because if the fans could ever pump this up to like $3 million, now we're talking, boys. That's massive then. Like that's a fucking really dope. Also, even if you're the ones win a lot of money, if you're Vitality, you also really want to win this because you're going to retire one day. This is where I'm going to get like an extra fucking 500k from just this one massive major. Yeah, that adds not only to the prestige but the hype of the event. And also, if you are actually, think of the teams that just did it. 9Z, if people don't know, you make like $40,000 prize money for coming top 8. Like that's all they've earned is 40,000. Imagine if instead by making top 8 they just made like 125,000 or something. Like, ooh, now we're talking something different. Like now making top 8's huge even for your career and for your org. So yeah, I'm with you. Right, the last point of the show.
I would just, go on. To add even further details to this, I looked it up. Of all the tier 1 esports, like CS's World Championship, we do have 2. Okay, so that does change things a little bit. We have 2 a year, but even some of these other ones have 2 big tournaments in a year. Like League has Worlds, but they also have MSI. And if you have like PUBG, there's just like 3 huge tournaments a year. It seems like Overwatch has kind of changed a little bit, but of all of these, I looked at all of them. League's Worlds is $5 million of a prize pool among 17 teams of 5 players. PUBG's World Championships is $3 million. You have 40 teams of 4, so it's the same amount of player total, but you have basically 3x the prize pool of CS. The Overwatch League playoffs, the last time that happened, had 8 teams of 6, 48 players. It still had a bigger prize pool, $1.85 million. The Rainbow Six Invitational, $3 million of 20 teams of 5. So that's still 60 less players with a $2 million greater prize pool. And the Apex Legend Global Series has 40 teams of 3. So it's still 40 less players total, $2 million prize pool. Every other game has a much bigger world championship in terms of it. And I also think that, I actually think of this from the press side. I think one thing, you bring up the crowdfunding element for But now actually what CS should do, I think this is such an easy fix, and I don't know why they didn't incorporate it given that they restructured how the money works, because now it's not just sticker money based off of the capsule you're in, but it's of the placement you're in. That should just be included into the total prize pool when published. That should be a known number so that it at least draws more attention to the space, because we never really knew exactly how much money was going into stickers. We'd hear little rumblings from different groups about roughly how much money they made, and that would have driven headlines, but it was so hush-hush that it never got the buzz for Counter-Strike that it really deserved, and probably should have just been plastered on the prize pool. Like, they should have just basically said, this is how much money all these teams made. Now, you can directly reflect, the prize pool should be directly reflected by the amount of money that is going into these sticker capsules, because the amount of money that you make from the sticker capsules and the amount of money is directly reflected by your placing in the tournament. So it's exactly the same structure as we got back in Dota, so that the higher, the greater percentage goes to the teams that finish higher in the tournament. Now that we have that, why is that not just a publicly known number? Because then we would get so much more buzz about Counter-Strike again. Like, people are drawn to huge prize pools. If we said, if this tournament, even with how much sticker sales have dropped reportedly from team sources, this probably still would be the most publicly huge prize pool in Counter-Strike history, which would add to the how grand Cologne is as a major. It would kind of be a psyop a little bit. Like, stickers did sell better in the past, so like the money made from previous majors is higher than this one, but it would still be an element that they could just say directly reflects in the prize pool. And I just think that CS needs that kind of buzz right now, because it's chugging along, it's doing well, but why not just give it a shot in the arm that is literally there? Like, everything's already there. All you need to do is publish the number.
Okay, the last point of the show, I have picked as my ugly, a very topical one, which is, in the same way as NAVI failing was such a bad moment, the team that capitalised aren't in a much better spot. G2 is the one that got to go to the playoffs. And bro, for a team that's just made it and beaten the number 2 team, NAVI, etc., and made the play, they are so fucking scuffed. It is crazy. That's why I'm putting them ugly, not bad or good. Like, if you go and look at it, first of all, Heavy God already is their best player. He had to be like twice as good in this tournament. It was crazy. Even the eye test, the amount of times I saw them in games that were close, where they were about to lose a round and he would just get like a massive 2K that would just completely change the round and just shut it down and win like a mega 1v1 against someone. It was absurd. Like, he has carried so hard. Meanwhile, across the board, the rest of them have actually been pretty underwhelming. Like, put it this way, this team gets criticised in the normal circuit. They've been worse here in stage 3. Like, the numbers have gone down for a whole bunch of them. They're actually in really bad. If you go look at their T-side numbers for stage 3, it is fucking crazy work how little firepower they have on the T side going into the playoffs. I'll even add in a detail that's relevant to some of the other points of some of my shows. In that series against NAVI, I think, gambled that Ancient will be the decider. G2, by the way, both NAVI and G2's best map is Ancient. G2 themselves removed Ancient and just decided, fuck it, and go to a Mirage decider. That's their best map, but it's because they've been losing out the ass on it at this tournament. Their best map is gone. So I think this team, even though they made the playoffs, like, first of all, I think bad luck. You've ran straight into the side of the bracket where I don't think anyone gives you a chance to do anything. I think you lose immediately. Even if you somehow won, you'd lose to Vitality. No one has you doing anything more than stuff. I think this is one of those ones where you're going to get to say we were top 8 at the majors, so no one will go cry their eyes out if you don't make a roster move. But I think this team is really scuffed. Like, I think they're so lucky. If you even look at who they played, right, basically in this last phase, they were able to beat, they lost to Falcons. By the way, Falcons is the team everyone's criticising. They beat Foot, and Foot played badly at this tournament in stage 3. They lost to Aurora. Aurora semi-clapped them, and Aurora isn't even spending the top team. Everyone thinks the roster's getting changed. They beat Legacy, who's a bit underwhelming, and then Navi's kind of had a crap stage 3. So some of those are good names. I'll give them that. It's also quite a hard run of teams, but I'm just not very impressed. I've got to say, I'm putting them as ugly. I think G2's they're the ugliest team to make the playoffs in that regard. Like, 9Z played well to do it. All these, let's say, Aurora played out their minds to make it. Like, yeah, some of these teams didn't have the same opponents, but I think G2 looks ugly as fuck. There's my point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is fair. They've done well to get here. They're a weird looking team, when you watch them and when you kind of consider some of the parts, I think that Heavy God, obviously, as continues to be the talking point, is maybe destined for, like, let's say big things, not necessarily bigger things. It might happen here on G2. It depends on what kind of moves they want to make, but they still lack a super consistent. He does seem to be playing a little bit better at this tournament, but I think Sumpire still, doesn't bring enough of a complete game, right? As a player that makes things a little bit difficult. I think that Hunter as a caller is not as adaptable. Maybe it is like within the rounds a little too loose, a little too open. I think there's actually going to be a lot of vocality going on within this team. But I think as a caller, like how much of a dedicated kind of caller has he become? I think there is a little bit of running by committee on this team at times, which can work, but also brings into question like how essential he is to the squad. Nerds, it's still early enough, I think I might say, for him to be in, that it's like, can we give him a little bit more time? But really got to keep a close eye on this guy, because I think that there was a time where he could play to quite a high level and, was very hot property. But I do feel like since some questionable moves in places, and especially like the liquid time, it's really knocked him down. It seems like his confidence is not quite there. And it does also seem like this is a guy that you can sort of figure out. He's often just put in the same sort of role, the same sort of places. So if you are like a higher level team, you can take a bit of a look and figure out Nertz's style, or figure out how G2 like to use him. He's not very versatile at times in my mind. And then the obvious one for me, I think maybe you do need a player like this in there somewhere, but it is just Matty's. I think that the numbers are not quite good enough. Maybe he is on like a supportive element or whatever you want to say, but I think that they need a little more firepower to go alongside Heavy God. He feels like the only player on this team at the moment in their current form. Maybe there are ceilings there or whatever for some of these guys, but I think Heavy God is like the only guy that can truly compete to get this team consistently winning tournaments. And they also apparently need him, to play absolutely lights out to make it through to the playoffs. So I think they've done well, but I can kind of agree that it is a little bit ugly. It's not the cleanest way to get there. There's a lot of quite glaring issues with this team that I think come in from the aspect that G2 have maybe not necessarily like opened the checkbook with some of the moves. And they do seem to, make a few questionable ones. They maybe are allowing the players to run things a little bit too much, when we had Snacks, when we had Taz and whatnot. I think that those were questionable decisions, to say the least. So, we'll see where they go in these playoffs, but I think that this is still not a complete enough team to consistently compete at this kind of level. And I do definitely see them just kind of going out, damp squib style as the playoffs get going here.
I would, if I did a power ranking today of the teams of the playoffs, I would probably have G2 probably at 8th, maybe 7th over Bet Boom, but just like that would be by a hair if I even had to do it. The struggles that this team has, despite the talent on the team, is indicative of a couple things for me. I'd say one, the T sides are just so messy. The way that they were able to beat NAVI in the Inferno game by just slamming B hits over and over, they literally won a round running through 2 smokes because they just got better. They just got better trades, and it wasn't even that well structured of a B hit on Inferno. They just were running through smokes, and they just got a couple kills in their favor, and it was just they play some of the messiest CS when the pressure's on of any team. Like it does actually disappoint me to such a high degree that NAVI, who have a calculated system, were lacking on a couple of their individuals, even though the systems put them in place. Like the amount of first kills that NAVI cleanly gets, the amount of setup that they have to get map control, and then they just kind of fall short because either a late round situation or one player on G2, namely Heavy God, was able to get a 2K or a 3K. It was absurd. And it was everything in that match to me was just saying, wow, G2 just has better firepower. And I think Thorin, actually, you came on my stream and we had this conversation about how good G2's firepower is, and fans will just immediately, they'll just react by saying, what? How could you say that these players have better firepower because they're not winning? And it's like, they don't go hand in hand. Heavy God wasn't a top 20 player of last year. He might have been the best anchor of last year. Like if you take away team results away from him, he was, per his positions, and being able to succeed with no help, No one's next to him. It's a top 10 team in the world running at him onto his bomb site. He was still able to put up 1 kill, 2 kills. But when he's in bad spots because he has to rotate all the way to the other site, or all of his players in middle died, and he still is able to put up those kills on such a frequent basis, that's firepower. It's not what G2's trophy placing or lack thereof on the podium is at the end of the tournament. They have exceptionally good players, and yet they're barely able to scrounge together these results. I will say the Mirage had a couple nice T-side rounds that I have to respect. I mean, I think the very first or the second gun round was actually really, really good for them. Like they took mid, they kind of waited for a while. They had Mattis this lurk top mid. Then they went for an A split as Navi were trying to clear Mattis top mid. That was extremely good. I really, really appreciated how they were able to stage the round, take map control, put pressure on, and then understand where the weakness was on the map. That was nice. But so many other maps to me are just, do we win the mid fight on Ancient? Yes, no, okay. Well, that round's decided. Okay, Banana on Inferno. We're just going to hammer this every single round. Nertz is going to walk through every smoke that he sees. And I'm going to say right now, Nertz is on fraud watch. Nertz is absolutely on fraud watch. He has completely fallen off a cliff from what he did on Heroic and on Ents, and what he did on Liquid. You know what? You know the crazy. This is a truth nuke right here. Is that if you actually use the top 30 filter on Nertz for 2026, he was a 1.1 rated player on Liquid. He was 0.1 higher on Liquid than he was on G2. Like, he has, like, that whole phrase about your time on X team does not count. His time on Liquid is actually individually better than his time with G2 thus far. That's how crazy it is right now. Liquid wasn't always competing with the top team, so oftentimes he gets to play against better weaker opposition when you even use these filters. Regardless of that fact, this dude has completely not found his footing. And one kind of stat that I found when I was really digging on G2 earlier as they were assembling this roster, they are extremely bad at getting first kills against ecos, and a lot of that comes down to Nertz taking really bad fights. Like, if you remember on the Dust 2 game versus Navi, he's just sitting top mid by himself with a rifle, and a Tech9 just one-shots him around the corner. There's no chance for a trade. He wasn't set up with nades. This dude is just walking around the map aimlessly on any given round looking for free and easy kills. And I don't know why he is like reverted to this like super selfish style of gameplay that I'm just scratching my head after every round wondering, like, was this part of any plan at all? Because I think more often than not, he's just doing what kind of kept his stats afloat on Liquid, and he has to break those bad habits right now because this team could be really good. This team could be contesting for top 5 regularly because of the personnel on it. But Nertz right now is the biggest culprit of being a total noob stomper and not actually understanding how he needs to play when he's actually in the server against top 10 teams in the world. So he needs to shape up, shake off the cobwebs of playing against elite opposition, because this team can come together. A lot of it comes down to him. I even think Sunpius is overhated by the community right now. Like, this dude delivers a lot of really big moments for them, like clutch moments. His scoreboard, on the scoreboard, yeah, he is not there with the top 5 operas in the world, but he's not even, to me, he's not outside the top 10. He's more around like the 8th or 9th best opera in the world, which today, it doesn't feel as great because in CSGO, the 8th best opera in the world could still carry very frequently. But in CS2, you live with that. Like, you just have to live with that. So I don't really know a suitable replacement for him off the rip, unless they wanted to, backtrack on the whole Klim idea there of maybe keep bringing him in. But it seems like this guy offers too much in terms of calling ability. And I have a feeling he does. I have a strong feeling Hunter is actually not a great in-game leader yet. In fact, we have watched rounds that have comms on them from G2. Sunpius is talking more than Hunter in a lot of these in these clips. Like, Hunter isn't, there's been rounds on T side, Hunter doesn't say a single word after he dies, and they play 30 seconds of the round out as they're figuring out what the mid round is. That's not an IGL to me. That's like he's fragging well enough that you actually maybe should include him. But like the biggest problem for me right now, T side calling and Nertz. So that's my take on him.